Hello. Can you guys hear us? Can someone post in the chat if this is working? If this is making sense? Testing, testing. How's the audio? Why is there no audio? I can't hear myself.
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Good. Sound levels, is it? Guys, can you hear us? Oh, sick. Perfect. Audio is good. Wonderful. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Deep Dive about personal and professional enhancement with Notion, partly about other things as well, featuring the one and only August Bradley, who is an absolute legend on the internet. He's been making videos about Notion for the last, for the last several months, and that's literally taken the world by storm. August, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Well, thank you, Ollie. It's awesome to be here with you. Super excited.
Fantastic. So I was stalking your website a bit, and you have quite the resume. But I wonder if you can just kind of for the people who are watching this who might not know you, can you just give us a quick background about who you are, what you do, and what has brought us here today?
Well, yeah, I've had one of those very zigzaggy careers. So to keep it short, but I would just put in a little note that anyone who's having a zigzaggy career, I highly recommend it. I think it's the way to go through life. So lots of different experimentation through life. So basically, I went a very traditional business route. I went to business school, got an MBA. I thought I was going to go on a corporate track and build businesses, but in a more traditional context. And I got the jobs that I most wanted out of business school, a couple of them, and I was just bored out of my mind. I just couldn't take it. So I had to go back to making things. And the thing I knew how to make was photography. In high school and college, I was a total photo geek, the newspaper photo editor and yearbook, and that's the one thing I knew how to make. My mom was a professional photographer. So I moved back to photography, which led me to doing advertising photography. That's how I made my living for a while, had a pretty good run doing that. And then that led to making TV commercials. I built a production company and was directing and DPing for a while and directing, and sort of built that and kind of hit a plateau. I couldn't get it to the next level. It was a good business, but I wanted to get into that upper tier and just seemed kind of stuck. And then around that time, that whole virtual reality movement was breaking, and it became the hot trend a few years ago. And a couple of friends of mine were at the forefront of that, and they invited me to join them to be COO of their company. So I joined them, and that was amazing because it suddenly was in the tech field mixed with the media field, and I found that that was a really great combination of things. But all along this whole journey, I'm implementing these. One of the things I enjoyed the most was implementing these systems and processes. Like running a production company, as you know, you're running a production company, but as it scales, it gets even more complex. You're putting these systems and processes in place. There are a million moving pieces with really hard deadlines and a lot of demanding, parties have a stake in it. So you have to have a very consistent process flow. So I was putting these processes and systems in place to just do the creative work and the business work. And when I became COO of a company, that was even more of an opportunity to do it beyond just a creative process flow. And then that led to consulting work where I worked with a number of companies in very leading edge technology fields, a lot of artificial intelligence and 3D printing and a lot of AR, VR. And with all these companies, the opportunity that I could bring the most value most quickly was putting in systems and processes. So that became my thing. And it ultimately became a consulting practice where I specialized in that. And then when Notion came along, I was like, this is the tool I've been looking for all my life, because I'm not a coder, so I can't code my own software. And even working with coders, it takes time to develop original software code. But with Notion, you can basically put the pieces together very quickly and design your own systems. Now, of course, there's a few shortcomings that we're looking forward to overcoming, most notably the API. That's close. And so Notion was basically what I was waiting for this whole time. And so I started bringing that to clients initially who had never heard of Notion. And I was like, this is the system platform. We can build the system we want on top of. And then having done that for a while and then built my own personal system, in many cases, I'm working with founders of companies. And you can put a system in place for a company, but if it's a small company with a very tightly controlled by the founder or CEO, if you don't have their personal systems in place, if their life isn't in order, it doesn't really matter what you do to the company. You have to put the systems for the individual who leads the company for a small enterprise and the company in sync. So I started building more and more personal systems for the leaders of these companies, and Notion is just perfect for that. So that led to me starting to share it on my YouTube channel, what I was doing with these companies and for myself, and it seemed to strike a nerve. So people responded to that, and increasingly I've been teaching individuals how to implement these kinds of systems.
Yeah, no. So that's quite a zigzaggy career, and I think it's a real, yeah, like the success of your YouTube channel is a real testament to this idea that actually the more you niche down, the more successful you can be in any one thing. Because I suppose if you were trying to make videos about like generalized productivity or something, it probably wouldn't have been as successful. But because you are kind of nerd level 10,000 on the Notion thing, that is the thing that people are following you for. And then, they like your personality and then they follow your other stuff. And it's just like that virtuous cycle that continues.
To highlight that point, I actually released about 8 or 9 videos prior to deciding to do the Notion thing that were about general productivity.
Oh, okay.
And
Cool.
crickets,
Yeah.
24 views, 30 views,
Yeah.
20 views. And then I just said, okay, Notion, I just have something more interesting to say with Notion than in terms of bringing immediate value to people. I think there's a lot to say about productivity, but it takes time to build that up, and you have to have credibility before you go into it anyway, because everybody's got their 2 cents on that. So I just deleted all those videos and just started doing Notion. But not just, I mean, there are a lot of Notion channels and a lot of very good ones, but my channel is unique in that I'm not just covering different pieces. I'm going step by step through a single system. Every piece is part of a larger designed system, and I'm just covering it, each part in detail. So the entire thing is like a series. It's almost like a Netflix series. They don't stand on their own. They work together collectively.
Yeah, and I love the way you put it together. Welcome back to the series where we talk about how to organize your life with Notion. And
Develop a life operating system.
yeah, it's just so good, and it feels like every episode has been really thought through, because and then in the video description you link to the previous episodes, and I browse through it and think, damn, I really wish my videos could be as structured and as well thought out as this. How to what extent did you come up with the system in advance before starting to implement it, or versus it was just a system that sort of evolved and metastasized by itself?
Great question. So it was developed before I started the YouTube channel. So it was all together. It's obviously still evolving, but essentially it was done by then. But to the more central point of your question, when I was developing it long before the YouTube channel, that's a real valuable insight into systems thinking, which is something I think we're going to touch on, which is complex systems don't start out as complex systems, at least not successful ones. If you set out to design a complex system, it's likely to fail. They start by having successful small systems, and then you find the small systems that are working and are effective, and then you build around that, and then to the point you find the successful combination, and then you build a little bit beyond that. So it ultimately becomes complex to someone just coming in from the outside, but each part was tested step by step along the way, and that's really the way you get to a larger, more comprehensive system, almost across the board.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've really noticed this as well, when like working in hospitals with electronic patient record systems, because the UK is not very technologically advanced, and so very few hospitals use something like Epic, which is like a sort of monolithic behemoth of a system where everything is integrated. Instead, it's a case of, okay, we're going to switch from paper notes to using electronic drug charts, and then that's a system, and then that starts to work, and then someone thinks, okay, cool, we've done that, let's get the vital signs onto a system and puts it, and it becomes a case of all of these little bits of the system work individually, and they're kind of being tacked together because that's how the workflow is evolving. But it's very frustrating for people going into it thinking, oh, why the hell do we have 8 different ways, and why do we have to go on a command line thing to look at blood results? Why can't it all be one system? And yet to create one system for something like that, where you have to have a changeover happening all at once. In the hospital that I worked at in Cambridge, when they switched to using Epic, which is like a big provider of electronic patient records, that was like a single switch over where everything switched all at once.
Right.
And like a lot of people said, why did you have to switch everything all at once? And they were saying, well, you can't not do it. You can't have the system that kind of metastasizes, because then you run into issues. I guess that's something that you would have come across as well.
Well, ultimately, a comprehensive system is going to be more effective because it's designed to work together. And that's one of the things, is you can get this sort of emergent quality of a system that is comprehensively synergistic. Like it's designed to really complement each other. The different parts enhance the other parts. But when you're built, but you could have a system that has been designed and tested and built out to be comprehensive, and then roll it into a new implementation. That's common. But in terms of designing the original system, whoever the developer of the system is, they would need to build it out gradually, testing the components. But I don't think it's totally doable and done every day to roll in a comprehensive system to an existing enterprise if the comprehensive system has been well developed and well tested and built out through these stages. But I think ripping the Band-Aid off fast and just diving in is definitely the way to go. And that's kind of a thing that I'm encountering with my system. It takes some effort for people to implement my system. It's harder up front, but that initial investment gives you a lot of smoother sailing on the back end, and that's sort of the trade-off.
Yeah.
Than trying to piece it together yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think systems thinking, like, I think for me, when I first started thinking in that way, or trying to think in that way, it was a real light bulb moment. And it happened when I was reading the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, I think, and about just because I'd been running a company for like 5 years at that point and hadn't read anything about like managing a team and leading a team and stuff. And I just was making so many mistakes, and I was thinking I had to do everything, and there were no processes, no systems in place. And then reading that book, I was like, oh, hang on, this is what you can do with this. So I wonder if you can give us an introduction to what is systems thinking and why is it so good?
Right. So it's very valuable in giving you a new perspective, because most of our training, most of our education, most of our work experience is not systems thinking. Now, we all live in systems and we work in systems and we're aware of that. So we might think, okay, well, I'm thinking about the system, but it's actually more of a philosophy or a framework. And it's more disciplined than you would just assume by the title. So let's explore it a little bit. So at the most basic level, it just means thinking holistically. And everybody thinks they think holistically. But all of our training has been break things down into component parts, study the parts so we understand how the parts work, with the implication that if you add them up, then you have the system. But what's interesting about systems is that their power comes from cause and effect that only works when it's combined. So if it's not the sum of the parts, it's something that rises above, beyond the combination of the parts. So if you're studying the parts, the thing that's most interesting and powerful about the system isn't even present until you bring them together. So systems thinking teaches you to look holistically at how various elements are interacting. So fundamentally, every system is part of a larger system and is defined by its role in the larger system. That's what makes the system that you're looking at, a thing to look at. That's what defines it. I've got a short slide deck that sort of introduces the concept a little more systematically.
Yeah,
if you're up for that. Okay, let me just flip over to that. It's only about 5 minutes, so we can go through it quickly, and
awesome.
I'll blast through it. But I think it'll give a more basic foundation to people coming new to this.
Perfect.
All right, let me just switch the screen share.
In the meantime, guys, if you have useful questions from the chat, then put them in, and Angus will be making a list of them, and we'll kind of get to those questions as we're going along. Okay,
can you see the slide deck there?
Yes, there is still a bit of a weird window. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
How's that? Good?
That's fantastic.
Okay. So we'll just blast through this, but this will just give a basic foundational understanding. So systems thinking will magnify, the reason you do it is it's going to magnify your ability to create and solve problems, and then ultimately give you the capability of designing your own systems to have the full power of what systems are capable of. Let me get my ability to forward.
Oh,
okay. So
that's so beautiful.
Spent all night doing that. Kidding. So systems thinking enables you to see causal relationships that others are missing. It lets you bring more to the conversation because you're looking at things more holistically and you're looking at the dynamic relations between things. So this is largely designed for Notion, and Notion is a uniquely good platform for building systems, and we're going to get into that more when we elaborate. But without systems thinking, using Notion you're heavily limited if you're not applying a systems thinking when designing Notion. It almost requires it.
Okay.
Going beyond a single database. So traditional thinking, you break things down into parts. Say if you're learning how to work on a car, you're going to learn how different parts of the car work. You break it into components, but the magic of a car isn't how the belt system works or the radio works. It's how it all works together.
Yeah.
So we want to get beyond component thinking. Now, obviously, you have to do both. You have to, when you're learning something new, you need to do component thinking and holistic systems thinking. But most people just break down the parts and they don't step back and look at how everything's interrelated. We can skip a few of these just to get to the meat of it. So a system is divided into component parts. It can't function, so it doesn't have the worthwhile properties that make us interested in the system in the first place.
Okay.
Broken into the parts, the thing of interest in your system doesn't even exist. So you have to look at the whole system. So ultimately, systems thinking reveals properties and causal relationships that, again, don't exist individually. The phenomenon of new qualities forming beyond the core properties when they're working together is called emergence. So we're looking for, when you're studying a system, you're trying to identify what is emerging from the system that didn't exist independently. So some quick examples are consciousness and life itself. We've got these body systems. You as a doctor know this more than most. Yet consciousness and life is something that you couldn't even predict just looking at the component parts. But it doesn't have to be grandiose and high level. Like water is hydrogen and oxygen combined, but neither hydrogen nor oxygen have the quality of wetness. It's only when they're combined that this quality emerges. You wouldn't even think to look for it if you just saw the component parts. So the ability to recognize emergence is a cornerstone of systems thinking, but the ability to design for emergence is like a real superpower.
Ooh,
and that's
a nice quote.
That's ultimately what we're trying to do when we're building systems for our personal performance in Notion. We're trying to design them so they deliver this emergent quality.
Okay.
So how do you do it? So we'll break it down just very quickly, and obviously we can elaborate if people have questions or if you have questions. But first you define the inputs and outputs in the movement. So every system, you're defining borders around a system. When we're talking about a system, we have to talk about a specific system. But as we said, everything's connected to other systems. So things are moving into what we're drawing the line around and out of it all the time, and they're flowing through it. Now, it's a bit contradictory to even talk this way because systems thinking would suggest that they're all interconnected and you can't you're breaking a component down by looking at a specific system because any system you look at is part of a bigger system. So, but for practical purposes, we have to be able to define a system and have a conversation with each other about it. So you just start by defining the inputs, outputs, and movements. Then you look for try to distinguish the linear from the circular because most of what we see in life, we think linearly. We project growth linearly. We see things happening and we just make assumptions that these lines will continue. But the interesting parts of systems tend to all be circular. The circular elements tend to lead to patterns. And patterns is what we're really looking for when we're studying a system. You want to look for the echoes of these patterns all over because you'll typically see patterns. It's extremely fractal if you know how fractals work. At micro levels, at zoom out macro levels, at whatever level of detail, you're going to see the same patterns repeating themselves over and over. And that's extremely revealing as we're studying systems. And ultimately, we want to find patterns that are looping over time where the effect, we're looking at cause and effect, where the effect magnifies the cause going into the next iteration. And that is a feedback loop, where the results of one pour more resources and momentum into the next iteration. And then the end of that one, the effect of that iteration pours more resources and momentum into the next iteration. That creates a feedback loop where things grow.
Yep.
And that's what leads to exponential growth. Now, at the same time, feedback loops can create downward spirals.
Yep.
So they could be destructive and reductive. We want to be able to identify these because this fundamentally is where you see not just cause. Most people look at causality and they think of it in terms of the initial cause and effect. But it's the scaling impact over time that leads to really big results. It's not the first order cause and effect. And that's where most people stop. Systems thinking has you both looking for causality between different components, but also how it's multiplying over time. So ultimately the whole game here is to, if you're analyzing, identify the exponential curves coming from these feedback loops and identify the downward spirals coming from them and break the negative ones and design for and build the positive one. So when we're designing systems, we want to look for how we can design positive feedback loops and identify and break negative feedback loops. So jumping in, so then the last quality of systems we need to be really aware of on a practical level is the balancing properties. So when you have these feedback loops building and building and building, they put a lot of pressure on the boundaries of the system and can definitely just break the system. They can make it just explode and not sustain itself. So if you're analyzing a system, you want to see if it's sustainable, by seeing if it has balancing properties that bring anomalies and runaway feedback loops back under control.
Yep.
And at the same time, you need to find a point of equilibrium, again, for it to be sustainable. Because you could have a short-term one that just has runaway success and just either implodes or explodes. But if you want it to be sustainable, and when we're designing systems for ourselves, of course, we want them to be sustainable. So on the equilibrium side, we want balancing properties to help maintain that balance. And just a very practical example, and consistently the biggest one when we're developing personal performance systems, is the weekly and monthly review. That is the quintessential balancing property. You look at what's going off track, what's getting chaotic, you bring it back in line. So you need to, in any system, particularly our personal performance systems, we need to think about how to identify and realign things that are getting out of alignment.
Fantastic. Okay.
And then we're almost done here. Then
Yeah.
you want to look at how, then ultimately, once you've done that analysis on the individual system, you want to look at how it interacts with larger systems around it. Because again, those feedback loops and those patterns are going to echo at larger scales and at smaller scales. And you can harness them more effectively if you see them operating at different magnitudes. And so this goes back to the classic quote that we don't rise to the highest version of ourselves that we can imagine. We fall to the level of our systems, and the systems are what keep us at that level. So we tend to not really go all out to maintain our potential, but we will fight like hell to not fall below our minimum standards. And systems are the most effective way at preventing ourselves from falling below those minimum standards. So that's sort of the end of the presentation, and we can elaborate, but that gives sort of a basic foundation of how to practically approach it.
Okay. Oh, so there's quite a lot to go into there. I feel like for me, I've been sort of trying to think in a more systems way, but I didn't realize that there was like a thing called systems thinking. And I guess in my head, I always just kind of assumed that it was just some system thinking, like just some random descriptive BS. But kind of the way that you've done that presentation, there are so many aspects of my life and like the business and the YouTube channel where I think, oh yeah, that perfectly encapsulates this idea of systems thinking. And I've been trying to, in a way, kind of use Notion to build a system for the business and for my personal life, but just not really having the terminology or the mental models to describe systems thinking until just now. So thank you.
Right.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
certainly understandable. It's not intuitive, in terms, especially given the way we're taught in our educational system. So it takes a lot of times people will say, yeah, I know that, and dismiss it pretty quickly. But there's a lot more substance, and it's one thing to have heard it; it's another to know it and to internalize it. So it's definitely going to bring you different perspectives. Certainly, even just for conversations, you'll have more to contribute to a conversation by looking at the world this way. But when it comes to designing, you'll have more ability to implement when you can create systems that function, with those repetitive loops reinforcing your desired outcome.
Yeah, awesome. So one thing one systemsy thing that I always struggle with is the weekly review. I came across the weekly review in 2016 when I first read Getting Things Done, and I was like, oh damn, this is sick. And since then, I've maybe done 7 or 8 weekly reviews in the last 4 years. And every time I do one, I think, damn, I should do this more often because this is great. And yet,
Right.
What's your take on weekly reviews?
It's consistently the hardest thing for people to stick to. And I've gone through long periods struggling with it. I'm on a long run of consistently doing it now, but I've basically had a heart-to-heart talk with myself about what I need to do to get where I want to get. And fundamentally, weekly review is one of the 2 or 3 most important things you can bring into your life to achieve the things you want to achieve in your life. Because it can, all the time, we will make grand visions, really thoughtful reflections on who we want to become and where we want to go. Not everybody does that. That's the first step. But once you've done that, then you want to actually implement it day to day, and you want to have a systematic operation that drives you in the pursuit of that. But if we don't revisit that frequently, it just drifts away. How many times have you made a goal and you just drifted away from it, and then 6 months later, 9 months later, you're like, oh, let me take a look at that again. Oh, that was a nice thought. That's way over there now, and I'm way over here now.
Yeah.
So I did that over and over, and most people do that. So the weekly review and the monthly review are designed to do an assessment and make sure that the things, this is what I call alignment. Like, my system is very much about focus and alignment.
Okay.
And alignment means we identify the things we want to achieve in our lives, our aspirations, and what we want to do with our limited time on Earth here. And we want to then make sure the things we spend our days and hours doing are moving us toward that. And the weekly review and monthly review is the check to make sure we're not drifting away. The power of Notion, though, Notion enables a weekly review like no system or no platform I've ever seen, because, and I can show you this if you want, it lets you, essentially a weekly review is a checklist. So you go through the checklist and you check the things that matter. But most importantly, the weekly review, I'm checking whether my daily actions lined up for this week are in line with the projects that I've defined. And the monthly review is making sure my projects are aligned with my goals. So everything sort of sorts out on that scale. But in Notion, we have the checklist, but not only does it guide the things we want to check, we can, with a toggle, open a embedded database. We can do all the work right on the same page. So we're not jumping around to all these different places. We're just, for this check, I need to make sure all my projects have at least one active task for the week. I open the toggle, I have all my projects right there. I check each project that has an active task. If they don't, I assign it right there. I close the toggle and move on to the next point. So I can get through a pretty sophisticated weekly review in 20 to 30 minutes. Now, sometimes 20 to 30 minutes, like, oh, I don't have 20 to 30 minutes. Well, what it gives me for that 20 to 30 minutes a week is transformative. Like, it has changed my life on a profound level, and it will do it for anyone who does it. And of course, you have to identify the right ambitions in life, and that's a process you do at the beginning. But once you've identified what you want to move toward, this weekly and monthly review will get you there more effectively than anything else you can do. So, I mean, I can walk through my template on how it enables you to do all this stuff so quickly without leaving the page. That's the key, is Notion lets you do it all in one place, because you can embed and design a single dashboard in a way you can't anywhere else.
Yeah, I'd love to see your system. And kind of while we're going through that, if you can kind of, because I imagine your system is quite elaborate, but I wonder if you can kind of identify, like, if someone is building the system from the ground up, i.e. me, what are what's like the 80-20 that you absolutely have to have in a weekly review, and what are the more kind of optional bits?
Sure, although the weekly review isn't that complicated, and it can just stand on its own. I'm basically going to show you how to do a weekly review, which you can apply to any context. It can be part of the system, or it could be independent, but it'll be clear what should be connected. Let me just figure out how to switch. Oh, so I need to switch screens. Okay, there it is. Back to the Notion system. That's it. Okay, so can you see my screen now? I know you got some gray blocks.
Yep, there's one gray block.
There we go. Okay,
perfect.
So this is the command center, but that's more than we want to get into at the moment. So I'm going to go into all of my weekly reviews are part of what I call the alignment zone, which is where we align the high-level aspirations all the way through goals to projects to daily actions, even hour-to-hour actions. But in the insight section, I have the review cycles, which is the daily data tracking, weekly reviews, monthly reviews, quarterly, annual. So we're going to dive into the weekly. This is a template. This isn't my actual one, so it lets me show a little more fully without revealing my entire life. But this is the template I'm building for the course I'm doing soon. Let's see. So let's go into the actual, we can go to one of this month. So I just want to make sure that it's the most up-to-date. Oh, yes, it's the up-to-date one. So, so this is a weekly entry. So you're creating, for the weekly review, you'll create a database. Let me just go back to that. That each entry in the database is a week. So September 14th through 20th. Is this big enough? I can make it a little bigger so people can see it easier.
Nice.
So 14th through 20th is this week. I always put two little arrows next to this week, so when I'm pulling it up in different relational searches, I can tell which is the current week. That's the previous week. Obviously, you'd have a whole bunch of them. This is just a template. So I just have the two in here as examples. And then you open that up, and you have so you'll have these properties. Now, this looks a little long, and I tend to try to keep properties tight, but I'll just point out very quickly, all of the ones with the little magnifying glass on the left and a link icon on the right, all of those are roll-ups. So another beauty of Notion is that that's all rolling up from my daily tracking. So each day I enter certain data. Some of the data is just my habit tracker. Did I meditate? Did I work out? And some of it's more specific numbers, like what time did I go to bed, what time did I wake up, how long did I sleep, what's my weight, certain things I'm tracking. This, when I come to this at the end of the week, because I link to it through relation each day, this is all of those magnifying glasses are already fully populated with averages and full ranges where I can see outliers across all the data that I've chosen to track. Each person will have a different list of tracking data. So that's already there. I can just with that data assess my week to a high degree. So, but for the most part, I don't actually do anything up here. I come down here, I design this so we can roll through it in order and it'll cover everything. So it's not that long, but again, 20 to 30 minutes, I can do this every week. So I skip the top because I've embedded databases down here where I can enter all of this in sequence and in context. So first and foremost, I have this list here, which is empty, but this would be all of the actions that I've completed during the week. So it's going to filter for, I'd enter the beginning of the week date and the end of the week date, and it's going to show me everything. So I have a to-do list, and when I finish something, I check it off.
Okay.
This shows me all the things I checked off for the week. So I have a summary of everything I did that week, which is really helpful because usually we forget what we did during the week.
Okay, and
so I have
and just on that note, so do you use Notion to track your to-do list as well, rather than something like Todoist or things that's more explicitly designed for that purpose?
I use Notion, and I think it runs circles around Todoist. I moved to Notion from Todoist, and clearly I love Todoist. I think there's some really nice. I think it's really a nice app, but it just does tasks. It can't do projects, and it certainly can't relate to goals and higher level aspirations. And the ability to align them and have transparency across the whole hierarchy has been transformative for me.
Sweet. Okay.
So all of my task management is in here, which lets me list every task I've done, organized by priority, filtering out the quick little ones, which are tagged separately. So I can just do a quick summary of what I've done this week. Then I come to this Dropbox, and the first thing I do is I have a list of guiding principles for my life, which is the result of my annual review. The annual review, you go through a deep reflection for a weekend, and what I do is I boil it all down to a very small set of bullet points, so I can very quickly summarize. Because what happens is you do your annual review, you have these insights and plans, and then you drift away from it over the year.
Yep, absolutely.
And you just drift away. It's natural. Well, what I do is first thing I do every weekly review is I review the very succinct high-level bullet points from my annual review. And so I have them under toggle. So I'll have a state of being, my process, I'll have family, bullet point, business, health. And all I'm doing is skimming. I can do this in like 30 seconds. So I'm just skimming the high-level bullet points. What drives me? I'll have maybe one or two bullet points. Purpose and why. I'll have a sentence or two or three. Foundational core. I'll have these laid out. So in 30 seconds, I can just skim and review and stay close to the guiding principles I've set for myself. It takes 30 seconds, then I check it off. But it stays top of mind, and I don't drift away. Now, this one is a powerful one. So I open here, and this is good. I'm going to go through effectiveness, gratitude, accomplishments, disappointments, and summary. So this is the same stuff that's up here on the top. And I'm going to rate, but by filling out here, I'm doing it in sequence. And I have just reviewed my daily actions completed for the week. So I'm going to give an effectiveness rating. I'm going to say what I was grateful for that happened this week. I'm going to have a database for accomplishments and disappointments. I will enter them here. It's a super simple database. I just list it there, but that lets me roll it up to my months and to my years, so I can see all my accomplishments in context. And then what I could have, then I have a summary here. These improvements here are rolling up for my daily. Every day I say what I could have done better that day. All of those points roll up here, so I'll have 6 or 7 of them, and then I'll do a summary of all those, what's a reoccurring theme. Okay. And I'll just enter that summary, and now that'll roll up to the monthly review. And that'll roll up to the yearly review. So I always have this sort of rolling aggregation of what I could have done to improve. Okay. Again, I'm taking time to explain this, but this takes 30 seconds to do. Then I go check, check, check. Check them all off. Then I go here, email cleanup. I don't actually need to get inbox zero, but inbox review, so that anything loose and messy. This is the one time I have to leave this page. I'll just clean up the stars and clean up the inbox, anything that needs to be moved to archive or whatever. That's usually pretty quick because I usually take care of that throughout the week. Calendar review, I just look at the past week, look at the next week. That's super fast, always done with that, but just so I'm aware of, I don't miss anything coming up because I didn't review the calendar. This is where it gets more important. So the whole thing's organized by pillars, pipelines, and vaults. That's the organizational structure of my system. Pillars are the high-level guiding principles. Pipelines are the actions, the goals, tasks, projects. And vaults is the knowledge management part. If you want to look at sort of aggregating information and putting it in a usable form. So review, again, I'm explaining it, but I'm flying through this when I'm doing this. I sometimes set a timer just to make sure I don't start getting distracted.
Oh no, this is
So
good
review
stuff.
and
And
updates, the content,
you've got videos on your channel that kind of deep dive into all of this stuff for people in the
my
chat who are
videos go
getting
into every
confused.
segment of this. Yeah.
But
So
this is good stuff.
I have my content machine is my video production
Yes.
and podcast and newsletter production schedule. I can
Yep.
show you that if you want. That's a template I have available for free if anybody wants it. So I will jump over there and make sure. Sometimes I've posted some videos but haven't updated it into my published archives and put the links in there. So I'll clean that up here. It doesn't take very long, and I'll just make sure everything's in order in terms of the upcoming plan and the finished ones.
Yep.
And then check that off. Then waiting on, I have a toggle here. So in my to-do list, if I hand something off to someone else, I'm stuck until they do something.
Yep.
I'll change the status from active to waiting on. So I know everything I'm waiting on, because as I'm sure you can relate, many people don't have good systems, and you'll be waiting on something from someone and they'll totally forget about it. So I keep track of what I'm waiting on. And if it's taking too long at this point in my weekly review, I'll say, okay, that's taking too long. I'm going to change this back to active and give it a due date, a date in which I'm going to take some action on it. Now, very quickly, I have my due dates are DO dates, not DUE dates. Date I plan to do it. So I'm organizing everything by when I'm going to take action on it, not when I have to have it completed. So this will let me assign it to a specific date down the road to follow up and check on it. So waiting list is done. Projects and reviews. This is the big one I mentioned earlier, and probably the most important part of the weekly review for me, which is I look at all of my projects that are active. Projects can be lined up for future or someday maybe or whatever, but all the active ones, which is what I identified, especially during my monthly review. I will look at every one of them, open every one of them. There's a whole template in here which has all the action items for that project. Again, sorted by active, pause, next up, future. So I'll line up everything I can think of. Of course, you're always adding these to projects, but I'll make sure every single project has at least one action item. Otherwise, it's stuck, right? If that's how projects get done, is they have action items. So every week I make sure I have one or more action items for every project. I just make sure the quarters, I think quarterly, so I just check the quarters have the right amount queued up. That takes the most time, just to go through each active project, but that's also the most valuable. And then the planning's done. Then I just open this toggle. I have my daily tracking. One of the things is whether I did a weekly, monthly, or quarterly review. I'll enter a weekly review, just so that I'm keeping track of how consistently I'm doing the reviews.
Nice.
That takes no time at all. And then I'll add a new week. So this is just a toggle, so I can do it right here. Instead of going to the database, I'll just add the new week and assign the upcoming week so that all my days can be assigned to it. And we're done with the review. Then I just do a little cleanup with my desktop and downloads folder and any screenshots. If you use Loom or Cloud app, you need to just go clean up your screenshots. Boom, boom. And then I do any paper processing. If I have any paper bills or any physical processing, I do that. That's my weekly review. Done. Everything's in order. And then a similar one for the month. The month then makes sure I have the right projects lined up, given my goals. Whereas this makes sure I have the right tasks lined up, given my projects.
Okay. So it's like a different level of abstraction, kind of zooming out a little bit.
And it's important that nothing repeats. Otherwise, it gets too big. So there's no overlap between monthly and weekly.
Yeah. Awesome. What does your daily thing look like? I'm very curious about that.
So the daily, I call it the action zone, which is focus. I said the whole system's about focus and alignment. So the daily part is the action focus part. In the alignment zone, so we saw the alignment zone. This is where we align our high-level aspirations with our daily actions.
Beautiful.
And this is the template here. So this is actually, let me jump into my actual one, my real one, because it's going to have a little more going on. So this is my personal one for today. So I've got a number of folding toggles depending on what I want to do. So I've got the big calendar here, and normally it's more full than this, but I have a private toggle on.
Just question: so is this calendar what you use as your own calendar?
That's a good question, and it's 50-50. I use Google Calendar also. Okay. I typically at the beginning of the week will bring in all my scheduled appointments into this one. It's cumbersome, and I cannot wait till the API comes out so we can have that automated.
Yeah.
But what I recommend there depends on how active your scheduling is on Google Calendar. So if you have a ton of appointments, then I recommend taking your tasks as identified in Notion and time blocking in the Google Calendar. If you don't have too many appointments, then I recommend taking your scheduled appointments in Google and bringing them in here, and I'll show you how I do this.
Okay.
So I've got this laid out with client operations, active projects, and goal outcomes. But I spend my whole day, that's all just for lining up the week. I spend my whole day in this one toggle. This one toggle has my action items list for today, and it's sorted by priority. So we have immediate means I got to do it first thing I sit down at the desk. Quick means it's short, 2 or 3 minutes. I might as well just get it done quickly. Scheduled means it's a schedule has a specific time. So the live stream here is scheduled for 12 p.m. I'm in Los Angeles, so it's noon here. So that's scheduled for a specific time. If I had 5 things scheduled, they'd all be together with times, so I can see what's coming up, and this way I don't miss any scheduled appointments. But the big stuff is the priority. So I have first, second, third. I go to the fourth and fifth, but I try to keep it to 1 through 3 because you can only get so much done in a day, and it's better to be realistic. It's essential to plan the next day the night before, so that you have a plan waiting for you, and you're not just impulse driven when you sit down to work. And so I've planned this out the night before, and my first, second, third priorities are my most important things in order. And aside from scheduled activities, that's where I'm putting all my energy in.
Okay.
And then just reminders down here or errands. So this is how I run my whole day. Again, everything has a due date, a DO date, and that's the date I plan to do it. And that means I can have a calendar where I can lay out everything that's happening. Now, the problem with to-do lists is you have this endless list that becomes overbearing and defeatist because you never win. You never have a victory. So I essentially have a to-do list broken out by day. Now, this will be a lot busier when I have the private thing unchecked. But so the night before I'll make a plan for the next day that's realistic. It's a reach, but it's realistic.
Yep.
And so I have a good chance of actually having a full victory that day, which is not normally the case if you run a to-do list. But each day down the road, at least for the next week or so, I'll typically plan my due dates out for about a week.
Okay.
And unless there's an appointment, some of these I have important things coming up, so I'll just have the reminder scheduled. Every one of these will, of course, roll into the list today. Naturally, that's how you get automation in Notion at this point, is you have a due date, and the date is automatically moving it forward. So you're making a separate to-do list basically for each day, and the night before you assess whether it's realistic, and if it's not, you move things further out, and you prioritize what you're actually going to get done the next day. So that's basically what it looks like.
Okay.
And we can get fancier stuff like dependent tasks, but
what about for things, so do you schedule in, for example, when you want to go to the gym or do a workout or exercise or spend time with the family, like to what extent do you actually time block your days?
During the weekdays, I time block everything. Now, I go through periods where I'm doing pure time blocking, which requires Google Calendar. You can't do pure time blocking in Notion, but it's blocked out pretty consistently. I've got consistent work schedules during the day. I finish at a certain time so that I can have some family time, so that I can be to bed by a certain time, so I can get up in the morning. The key to the morning routine is the evening routine.
Nice.
So if I don't the whole thing hinges on whether I finish working at the time I tell myself. If I go over, everything goes off.
Oh.
That's the chain reaction initiation.
What time do you finish working?
I try to finish by 8 p.m.
Okay. And then it's family time.
And then have an hour of family time.
Yep.
I have a dinner hour break earlier. And have an hour of family time, then an hour of reading time.
Yep.
And then bed.
Oh, nice. And what time do you wake up?
I try to get up at 6:30. Sometimes it slides to 7.
Okay. So, and what does your morning routine look like?
Well, funny you should ask. I have a template for that.
Oh, sick.
Well, not for the whole morning. I have a morning startup template, which is part of my daily tracking.
Yep.
So let me just jump into that because it's
let's
actually
have a look at that. This is
a bit informative. So let me jump back over to the template here. So going back into my cycles, actually, let's just go to the alignment zone because I access the cycles through the alignment zone just to sort of lay out the structure here. That's the weekly, so we're going to go into the daily here. The daily, now, the way I would access this normally, let's do this the proper way, would be through my daily toggle. So I showed you, this is the template, but I showed you the daily action toggle. Sure. So underneath it, there is a separate toggle that usually stays open because I'm going through my day, I'm doing 2 things. I'm doing my planned schedule, but I'm also tracking my habits. Because executing is dependent on 2 things, your goal, project, task management, and your habits and routines. And there's sort of, you typically don't have, each will deliver on the goals. Not every goal has projects. Some of them are driven by habits and routines. So we've got the daily tracker down here. So this has already started. So during the day, all I see is what I'm tracking that I'm going to typically do throughout the day, reading, visualization, mindsets, and things I go through, which is part of the routine I'll show you. When I create a new one, Well, let's actually just go through the ones already created, but I have a template that creates this new one.
Yep.
The template's already been applied, but so I have the morning stuff that I will enter. So I enter my sleep data. This is just sample data, but I'll enter time I went to sleep, time I woke up, and then it'll calculate it as a fraction. I do that because it's faster to enter sleep time tab,
Sorry, time you went to sleep
minutes
and time you
tab.
woke up.
So I went to bed
Oh,
at
you went to bed at 10:45.
10:45.
Okay.
So I'm entering it not as a time, but I'm entering the hour, then
Yep.
the minute, and
Yep.
then a formula is calculating it as a fraction. The reason that's valuable is one is it's faster to go 10 tab, 45 tab. I can do it with one hand.
Yep.
But more importantly, as a fraction, I can import it into Excel and graph it and chart it and see trends over time.
Nice.
One day I hope Notion will have charting
Yeah,
and
so you
graph.
can automatically import it from Apple Watch or Aura
But you
Ring or whatever
can't
you want to. Yeah.
exactly. But you can't chart and graph
Yeah.
with a time stamp. You need a fraction.
Sure.
So I do that for the time I go to sleep, time I wake up,
Yep.
how long I slept, because sleep is super important. It's the single most important thing for daily effectiveness. It's like number one, ahead of food, ahead of everything else.
Okay.
Then I'll enter. Wait. So once this is the first thing I enter in the morning. I can do that in 30 seconds, and because I'm just looking at apps, and this is in sequence of the way the apps feed that information.
Yep.
Then this is what we saw on the other page. So throughout the day, I'll be checking off my habit tracker. I've
Yep.
got a percentage tracker. But what I'll do is I'll come down here, and then I've got, if I work out in the morning, which I usually do, usually before I sit at the desk, I got this. So I'll create a new entry to
Yep.
my workout. I have a gratitude. Now, most people recommend list 3 things you're grateful for.
Yep.
I think it's really important to do one thing and one thing only.
Okay.
Because if you do three, I find I'm just trying to check off a list.
Yeah,
But if you do
same.
one, you own it. Like
Okay.
you feel it
Yeah.
more than if you're trying to rattle off 3.
Okay.
So I do one thing I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
Then I say, what would make today great? Like what 1, 2, or 3 things, 1 or 2 is fine, would make today a success if I just get that done. And what helps me determine that is this toggle here has my action list for the day.
Yep.
So I'll look at the most, so typically it's my first, second priority, right? If I just get those 2 things done, today is going to be a success. But having the ability to see my list here makes it very easy and quick.
Yep.
Then my not to do list. What am I not going to do today? Because there are things we know will pull us off. So I have a toggle here, and I look at what, for the past week, were the improvements I listed at the end of each day that I needed to do better at. And by looking at the recent improvements that I entered, I know what I need to really be sure not to do today, not to, go in Twitter rabbit holes and not get diverted. So that's going to tell me what I've had problems with recently.
Yep.
And it's amazing how hard it is to think. I've added the toggle because I was like, what was it that I was really having trouble with the last few days? It's all right here.
Yep.
You'll see at the end of the day wind down, I'm entering my improvement for the day. Then I do my mindset routine, which is I have a list of ideas and thoughts that I want to make a part of my life. And normally you hear a great thought or a great quote or great passage, and then you just drift away from it again.
Yep.
Well, I have a page organized with headings of all my most powerful ones, and I'll spend 2 or 3 minutes just picking a handful of them just to review.
Okay.
Then visualization. We can talk about that if you want to. And then this is what we have under the daily tracker. I'll usually check it off there. But if I miss anything at the end of the day, I'll check it off that I did do. And at the end of the day, I just list today's wins. Again, I have a toggle that lists everything I checked off as completed for the day.
Okay.
So it reminds me what I did today. And then I do my improvements. The last thing I do is I say what percent, this is a percentage, what percent of the time did I spend today doing what I had planned to spend time doing? And what percent of the outputs and completions did I have that I had intended to complete?
Okay. And,
then
how
finally,
are you figuring this percentage out?
that's a subjective assessment.
Okay.
I'm just making an estimate.
All right.
But you get in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And over time, and then you look at this over time, and you can see consistencies. So nobody gets 100.
Yeah.
But if you're consistently doing 70 to 80% of what you plan to do each day, that's going to pay off,
Yeah.
and that's going to deliver success. But if it's consistently 40 and under 50%, once or twice, and surprises come up, and you can totally adjust your schedule.
Yeah.
But if you're consistently under 50%, you need to have a hard discussion with yourself. You need to ask yourself some questions.
Oh,
And then you
interesting.
say,
Yeah.
what could I have done better? Like in the moment, at the end of the day, what could I have done better today to have performed better in those numbers? And that's what rolls up to my not to-do list
Yes.
each day. And that's
Okay.
pretty much
And then
it.
in your weekly review, it rolls up into what my improvements were for each day.
All of
so
these
then you can
numbers
just write
roll
a
up.
quick.
Exactly. And it shows me how, at the micro level each day, how I could have done better. And then at the weekly review, you can aggregate it and see where the patterns are.
Sick. Okay. What's the deal with visualization?
Okay, so visualization as I'm sure I suspect you've heard, is a super powerful practice. I
Yeah,
do
so
it.
I've heard Tony Robbins gone about it, but I've never once tried it. And anytime I hear Tony Robbins talking about visualization, I look on it with a degree of skepticism. But then
Ah,
everyone who does it says, "Oh my God, this is the best thing ever." So, like, what's the deal with it?
okay. Well, do you believe in mental models?
Uh, as in
Okay.
that we have
Let me
different
define.
mental representations for different things in our heads, or what do you
Yeah,
mean?
I mean,
Yeah.
you basically the way we learn is we put little pre-packaged approaches to thing
Yep.
in place, and we have many of them,
Yep.
calling them as we need to.
Okay.
So visualization is basically developing one of those little mental model packets or
Okay.
sort of a behavioral thing to go to by default
Yep.
without having actually lived it. So we
Okay.
can live experiences and those create mental models, or we can close our eyes and really try to viscerally imagine that experience. And that's creating, it's not as strong as if we had actually lived it, but it's more than if we haven't even tried. So what I do with my visualization practice, of course, there are wide ranges. Like, well, take an athlete, like a tennis player, is going to visualize, or a golfer, a perfect swing. Just really mentally
Yep.
try to viscerally embody that. If you're doing a big sales meeting or a big presentation,
Mm.
your first YouTube live stream, you want to close your eyes and visualize yourself doing it flawlessly.
Okay.
That's going to help create a default path that
Yep.
you can go down without thinking,
Okay.
because it's to some lesser degree, but to some degree, a pattern you've experienced already. And we sort of default to the patterns we've already experienced, what's familiar. So with my visualization practice as part of my morning routine, again, it takes sometimes just 2 or 3 minutes, at most 5 minutes, but usually 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
I will either do one of two things. If I have a big challenge coming up,
Yep.
say a presentation, a meeting, speaking, I will close my eyes and as viscerally as possible envision myself delivering that flawlessly. Like
Okay.
that's the classic visualization. Athletes do it, business leaders do it, everyone
Yeah.
does it. Most days I don't have a big thing coming up. So what I do instead is I visualize myself executing the day as planned flawlessly.
Okay.
So I've got my list of what I'm going to do today,
Yep.
and it's so easy to get pulled off track. It's so easy to, oh, that YouTube video, that's really informative. I need to know about this. I didn't plan this, but I'm going to watch this hour YouTube video because, it's helping me, even though I have these other things that I prioritize the night before as the most important things to do. Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get pulled off my scheduled plans. So I will visualize myself going through the day, doing my priorities in order. I will visualize my break and my transitions, because we lose ourselves frequently. We finished the first thing we dove into, and then before we get into the second priority, we get pulled off on another thread. So I'll visualize the transitions. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to get some water. I'm going to go say hi to my wife.
Yep.
Then 10 minutes later, I'm going to come back and I am going to sit down and I'm going to, at that point, start on priority number 2. I will walk myself through the day with my eyes closed as viscerally as possible,
Yep.
imagining myself experiencing the day as planned. That's it. And
Damn.
it's creating a
Okay.
default
Yeah.
map. It's mapping my physiology for just sort of a natural path. Instead of, if we don't plan the night before
Yeah.
and don't visualize, we sort of sit down and go, okay, so what do we want to do today? And we get pulled in
Yeah.
different directions. And if you don't have something planned, you're not even procrastinating, because you're just doing,
Yeah.
because there's nothing you're skipping out on. You haven't defined what you're supposed to be doing. And I had a really interesting interview with on my podcast with Nir Eyal, who wrote
Yeah.
the book Indistractable, and he said, "Hey, I thought this was really, really revealing. In the given moment, if we don't have any guidance, our behaviors are guided not by what we want to do for pleasure, but what we're trying to avoid, pain avoidance.
Yep.
And often our number one priority is something that's uncomfortable to get started. It's hard,
Yes,
it's scary.
absolutely.
And so our pain avoidance tendency will guide us away from the single thing that's we've said is the most important. So if you schedule the night before and have a clear agenda, and then you visualize yourself doing it, it reduces the level of pull away from it and creates a default path toward it.
Okay. I want to start doing this. I feel like I need to make a habit tracker.
2 to 3 minutes
/
each
download
morning,
your habit
that's all.
tracker
It's
to
2 to 3 minutes. So easy. It's
make
fun.
sure it's like a checklist of things that I can do each day. Because that sounds like it would be really fun, and it would have been so helpful to just do that earlier today when I planned that I was going to edit scripts for 3 videos and then film the 3 videos and then film the overhead B-roll. Obviously, that's just way too ambitious for one day. And I ended up just doing one. But actually, I ended up doing the thing that I actually most needed to do. And I think if I had visualized it, I wouldn't have even thought that, hey, between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., I can just, it'll take me an hour to do this one, an hour to that one. It realistically doesn't actually work like that.
If you can be more realistic in your planning
Yeah.
for the day, you're going to feel so much better. And when you look at a day and it's unrealistic
Yep.
and you know it's unrealistic,
Yep.
you're not even really going to try as hard because you have no chance of completing everything. So you'll
Yeah,
just
that's
do
true.
what you can and you'll get as far as
Yeah.
you can. But if you have a chance, you're going to go for it, and like you're going to put more effort in to try to get over that goal you've set for yourself.
Okay. So can you talk us through, like, what does your morning routine look like when you wake up on on an ideal day?
Okay, so that's a lot of it. So
Yeah.
basically, I'll wake up and hop out of bed and just do the basic out of bed stuff. And then I will ideally go for a run or do some kind of workout. I like to work out in the morning. The thing you do in the morning is you got to do the most important stuff in the morning because later in the day things get derailed. So you have if fitness is a priority, sometimes it is for me and sometimes it's not. Right now it is because I sort of was working so much I got off my fitness goals, so now I'm trying to pull myself back on. But when business, like a month ago, fitness was a lower priority and some business goals were higher priorities.
Okay.
So I was just diving right into work.
Yep.
But now fitness is back, so I'm working out, then I'm coming back and I'm meditating because meditating is super effective too. We can talk about that as well if you
Oh
like.
yeah, definitely.
But I'll do a meditation.
Yep.
So I'll do a workout, meditation, then I'll start this morning startup routine. I'll come into my office, which is laid out as I just showed you.
Okay. Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about meditation. What's the so kind of background? I tried it for 3 days using Sam Harris's app, and then I was like, screw this. And I'm currently listening to Waking Up by Sam Harris, the book, and I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I'm now once again thinking, damn, this meditation stuff sounds good. Literally 100% of successful people say that they meditate, and I feel like I'm missing
Yeah.
something by not doing
Well,
it.
that's why I started it too. I study people who are
Yeah.
very accomplished, not just in business, but across all fields, and the consistency of some form of meditation is incredible. And so that's what led me down to that path. And at first, had a really hard time too, because I was like sitting and I was trying to make my mind go blank. Because right, you're supposed to
Yeah.
go blank, right? This is wrong, by the way. This is my big problem.
Okay.
So I'm trying to make my mind go blank, and it was so hard, and I was frustrated because I want to do it right. I want to do it well. Like I want to do everything well. So I want to be a good meditator, and it was just not doing anything for me. So I started reading and studying, and you need some guidance at first to figure out what it is. But what I discovered ultimately is that meditation is not about making your mind go blank. It's about being completely present, which means your mind is completely in the present. It's not blank. You're embracing everything that is like actually present,
Okay.
which means you're avoiding future thoughts. You're avoiding thoughts of in times and past tense, and you're avoiding fantasy. So you got to be completely present, which means you're really focusing on the sensations around you, the noises, the pressure of gravity, comfort or discomfort, the temperature on your skin, anything that's present. Just completely embrace it with your mind. And what you're training yourself to do is be present, which is essentially focus, right? And not have your mind running around. And then ultimately what you learn, and the reason that I so highly recommend it, is you learn that and Sam Harris is a great place to start if you're a very analytical person. There are other better approaches if you're sort of a more intuitive, less analytical person. Like Eckhart Tolle would be an example down that path. But whichever way you go, you're developing two skills. One is to just be present and focus, which is powerful for almost anything. But most important is powerful for just having a good life. Because if you can't bring yourself into the present, you're not even living your life. You're just going to have a collection of memories that weren't even there for. Right, which is what I kind of realized initially. Like I have all these memories, but I'm never in the moment. I just remember them later. I'm always thinking about this or that in any given moment, and that was frustrating, especially when you're with loved ones and family and people you care about. You want to be present with them, but at the same time, you want to be present when you're working, when you're doing anything. The ability to bring your focus and be in the moment and let go of worry about the future, regret about the past, and fantasy is like a massive power. So first thing is just learning to be present.
Okay.
And that takes a long time. And that's what you do at first. But the second thing, and this comes later, this is the more advanced thing, is that you learn that your mind is constantly generating thoughts and stories, and that you are not those thoughts and stories. If you don't meditate, you will believe that those thoughts and stories are who you are. You'll believe the identity that they're spinning is you. That's yourself. But by meditating, you learn to step out and watch those thoughts from the outside as an observer outside of them. You watch this machine of your mind just spinning this craziness. Like you have conversations with yourself. If you had anyone else talking to you that way, you'd think they were crazy.
Yep.
Yet you do it to yourself all day.
Mm.
Oh, the same loop over and over. Meditation, you learn to step out, observe it, and realize for what it is, which is it's just this ephemeral thing. It's as ephemeral and not central to you as any noise you hear outside of the house. And you learn to watch it arise and fade away. And I understand that it's not you, and that the ego that it's creating is not who you are. And it's incredibly liberating. Now, it's hard. Now, I will have that moment of realization in a fraction of a second in a meditation, and then I'll leave it, and then I'll go back to that thought stream, just identifying it with it fully. But the more you meditate, the more you can separate yourself from this thought stream, which can be incredibly destructive sometimes.
Okay. And I guess kind of the more you practice it, the more the ability to focus and be present in the moment also bleeds into other aspects of your life, where you're hanging out with the family, you are not kind of running through your to-do list and thinking, I could be filming another video right now, type
Yes,
situation.
but more importantly, when you have negative, again, feedback loops happen in your mind too. Your mind is a system. When you start having negative thoughts, fears, guilt, all these horrible things that just sap energy, if you can learn to step out of it and look at it from outside of it and realize it's just a story your mind is telling yourself, you can regain your composure. You can stop losing that energy. Once you see it from the outside, it breaks a lot of its power. If you're angry, like if you get angry when someone does something terrible to you, if you can step out of it and just look at it, what is the anger? It's your mind telling you the story that that person has diminished you in some way. And if you can realize it's just this ego built up from this thought process, it's not actually hurting you, what this other person did. They're just dealing with their own pain. You can just dissipate the anger immediately rather than harboring it for days or weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway, it goes on and on how it can be helpful.
Yeah. So I think this way about thinking about thoughts and emotions is something that I've kind of stumbled into just doing naturally anyway. And so a big part of when I hear people talk about meditation, I kind of think, well, I'm a pretty tranquil guy anyway. I don't let emotions affect me and stuff like that. But even so, I imagine there are still probably lots of benefits to it that I haven't yet explored because I haven't yet given it the chance. How long did it take you to kind of get good at it, slash to notice any sort of actual changes in your life? Like how long should I give it before thinking?
That's a really good question, because the practice is cumulative.
Okay.
You'll get almost nothing immediately.
Right.
You have to go. It becomes. I think it's happening sooner, but it becomes more noticeable after like 2 or 3 months. Seriously.
Oh, okay.
That's when it becomes apparent to me. Now, but here's the thing: you can lose it. I've gotten really busy. I've drifted away from the practice, and I lose it. Like you go back to your natural instincts so easily. So if you don't stick with it, it's not like you learn it and then you always know it.
Okay.
Because it's really hard to fight this natural impulse of the way your mind works, right? Your mind is good at tricking you, and the mind is good at pulling you into its narrative. It's like brilliant for it. In fact, it was a evolutionary survival thing to go along with these fears of your mind. But in our modern environment, so many of the fears that your mind spins up are not rational. They were rational in a wilderness survival context, but not in a modern society context. So, but to your question, a few weeks, you'll start feeling more relaxed initially. Relaxation isn't the point. There are bigger points, but it's a nice side effect. But over a few weeks, you'll start to feel like you're getting a little more perspective and a little more less emotional reaction to everything. But you kind of go back to it whenever you need it to. So if you have a really bad meeting or a really bad fight with someone, you can just go meditate, and it's going to bring you back to the place, or at least closer to that place than previously. But you have to do it cumulatively to build this sort of power of it. So it takes a commitment, but by cumulatively, you can start 5 or 10 minutes a day. Yeah. And then ultimately build up to 20 minutes a day. But start small and just make it part of your habit tracker.
Okay. And do you use an app, or like what does that kind of look like in practice for you?
I've used a lot of apps, Sam, and if you're learning, you need guidance. So unless you're going to go to someone guiding a meditation, you need an app that'll give you a guided meditation. So Sam Harris's Waking Up app is my number one recommendation. especially if you're an analytical person,
Yeah.
and most people I know tend to be, that he gives you sort of the oversight up front. Most guidance just first teaches you how to be mindful, and really only teaches you how to be mindful. It doesn't get to this understanding your ego and your thought stream as much. Sam Harris gets to the meat of it faster. The other really good source of guided meditations is Eckhart Tolle. In the book The Power of Now is like the quintessential book
Oh, I've heard
on
good
how
things about
why,
that. Yeah.
why meditation is powerful. The
Okay.
Power of Now tells you why meditation is powerful.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So from tomorrow, I'm going to start meditation, and I guess that would make for a good video, kind of like a Matt
But
D'Avella
important
style.
point.
Yeah.
Important point about meditation is
Yeah.
it's the practice.
Yep.
Like the meditation isn't the thing. It's like practicing tennis or practicing skiing. You're practicing meditation when you sit and meditate so that when you live the rest of your life, you have the ability, the skill to bring yourself back to present at will.
Okay.
So after you get good at it, then you apply it through the rest of your life as you need it. The practice is literally practicing that skill. And your mind will wander and you'll guide it back. And your mind will wander and you guide it back. That's not failing. At first you think, oh, I'm terrible at this because my mind keeps wandering. Yeah. Your mind wanders. That's what it does. The skill is eventually, when you recognize it wandered, to gently bring it back, and importantly, without judgment. So there's no good meditation and no bad meditation. You sat and you did it, and that was that.
Okay.
Good is as bad of a judgment as bad. So but the practice of eventually recognizing it and guiding your mind back to the present is the practice.
Okay.
It's not a failure.
Okay. Cool. Right. I'm going to start this from tomorrow. This sounds pretty great.
You got to build up. You got to do
Yeah.
it for at least a few weeks.
Okay.
It's a cumulative activity.
Okay, so let this be a public commitment to however many people are watching this. Right, I'm going to do it for at least the next 30 days, and we'll see how I'm feeling, and hopefully continue.
Highly recommend it.
Because I've been wanting to just start a meditation practice for ages, just haven't gotten around to it. Okay, lots of other things.
You got to carve out a time. Do it the same time every day. It's either it could be first thing when you wake up, when you go to bed, right after lunch. Just tie it to something else, and those two things always go together.
Yeah, good
It's
point.
a good habit development approach.
Nice. Do you think it would be as effective in the evening as in the morning?
I actually think it's more effective. It kind of depends. There are pros and cons to each. It's much easier in the morning.
Oh,
your mind is not racing in the morning.
Right.
First thing in the morning, some people meditate first thing in the morning. It's much easier because your mind is not like amped up.
Yeah.
Midday, afternoon is the hardest because you're in the work mode. You're doing 30 things. You're running behind on 2 of them. Like I kind of think that the most benefit might come from doing it at the hardest point if you can work it into your schedule. And then at night, it's helpful. Your mind depends when you do it. If you are the kind of person who finishes work and then lets go of it and then has some nice quality home family time, well, then it becomes easier later at night. But if not, if you're working up to bedtime, then your mind's still racing. If you do it literally right before you go to bed, last thing before you put your head on the pillow and go to sleep, it'll help you sleep.
Okay.
So that's another helpful thing. Ideally, you would do it twice a day, early and late.
Okay.
But I don't want you to bite off more than you can chew. It's more important to do it once a day consistently than to inconsistently try it twice a day.
Yeah, like I think so for me, for a while I've wanted to have something that gives me some kind of work-life separation, because now that I'm unemployed and therefore doing this video courses, ebook, life as an internet entrepreneur thing, the work doesn't end. It's not like you just can as you know as well. So like I like that you kind of stop working at 8 p.m.
That's my goal. That's not I can't say that I always live up to that goal. I fail that commitment frequently.
Nice. Cool. What does your content machine thing look like?
Oh, okay, that's actually that would be of interest to you. Let me pull that up.
So, I'm actually working on my own like course / video / thing, which is kind of like a behind the scenes at my own like content machine, which I call the infinite content engine, which I imagine is fairly similar because it's based around kind of Notion databases, blah blah blah. And I'm curious to see what yours look like.
Okay, so this is probably even a little not too bad. Okay, so this is it's a dashboard basically. Yep. It's my content dashboard. I've got a lot of quick things up here, which are like just quick thoughts and sketches and sort of the roadmap. This one's the roadmap for my Notion series. This is the roadmap for my podcast and for my newsletter. And sometimes it's just quicker to throw things into a bullet point when I have a
Yep.
spontaneous idea rather than enter it in the database. Eventually, it all gets in the database.
Yep.
But the real substance starts. I have this toggle here, and this is a list of ideas that I have. These are actually dated, the ones I had entered before I started my Notion series. Now that I do only Notion, I don't need to brainstorm as much because the
Yeah.
whole thing's pretty mapped out. But when I get back to broader range of content,
So
those will,
is that a separate database for ideas?
good question. This is one database. So let me open this up. This is like a single database
Okay.
organized by status. So I got
Whoa.
published, as all the published ones.
Yeah.
But everything, so the original ideas
Yeah.
are in the same database,
Yeah.
but they're just tagged as
idea.
potential.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Then there's stuff in production, and here's my production pipeline. In fact, so these are all tags. So I'm a guest on this video here. So that's one of the things. So even as a guest appearance, I'll list it here. I'll define whether it's my Notion series, my Mind and Machine, which is my podcast, whether it's my newsletter, a business video, or I'm a guest on someone else's show. But most importantly, I'll have these. So I'll have a potential idea, it's something that I've committed to and it's scheduled, something that's queued up to be next of the scheduled ones. It's in the writing stage, it's in the recording stage, it's in the editing stage, it's in the final post-production, ready to post and published.
Nice. Yeah.
And then we have this Kanban board here. For the ones in production, they're all flowing here. Let me even open this up a little more. And so they'll flow through these stages. And now that I'm starting to use an external editor, this is when I hand it off to the editor. And this is a stage for me to clean up any final touches after I get it back from the editor. Yeah. So things are flowing through here. Yeah. Then I've got and then of course I've got, let me see, the published archive. So this is everything published in order, but really more valuable than that is down here. I've got a list of my published ones. This is my favorite way of viewing it, just sort of this gallery view down here. And it's tagged by whether it's Notion series or newsletter, what have you. Right now, that's pretty much what I'm doing with some occasional guest appearances. But as I get my podcast, the new season starts here pretty soon. So the podcast will get in there and all that'll flow with it as well.
So
then I've got,
what's the point of having the published stuff? Like, why do you find that helpful?
Oh, if I ever need to access anything,
yeah,
I can open it up. Like, let me find one that I've done. So here's one I did recently. Hopefully I've updated. This is what I do in the weekly reviews. I'll update it. So I'll post this here. Got this whole template for the outline, which I'll use to sort of, I do mine in free form. They're not scripted, but I'll have an outline of points I want to make sure I hit. Okay. Title ideas, notes ideas. So this is very similar to the Thomas Frank template, which I thought was brilliant. Yeah. And this is largely, that was inspired my template here.
Okay.
And then I've got the action items lined up, and then the embed. Then the embed here of the link here for where it's posted. So I can just quickly and easily access it. Anything that I've already posted. Because I'm often trying to send links to people of past videos, so it's easy access. But the most valuable part of this whole thing, again, it's all in one database, is I have two calendars. I have the next action calendar.
Yes.
And then I have the publishing calendar.
Okay.
The publishing calendar is the scheduling of stuff I have coming up. This actually needs to be updated, so this is not my actual current schedule. But every week I'll update it, and that stuff coming out. But this is my next action, like the next thing that I'm working on. So I'm working on the newsletter on Saturday, and this is usually just about 1 or 2 weeks out planned. But basically anything in this, the production pipeline up here that's in the writing, recording, editing stage will have next action dates assigned to it. So I can track what I plan to do each day. So I have this interview with Josh Kaufman that I'm going to edit on Sunday. Yep. That's going to be part of the interview and stuff.
Yeah, because I think one of the issues with my system at the moment is, so I also have sort of inspired from Thomas Frank's thing, just like a central database with everything in it, which is very similar to your thing of idea, writing, editing, filming, blah, 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 until it's ready to publish and then published. But one kind of pain point I've noticed is that often within, I've only got one calendar view, which we use for like sort of a tentative publish date, and kind of once a week or once a month I get together with the team and we'll figure out, okay, let's do this video there, that video there, that video there. In reality, it's sort of almost immediately after that meeting, things go off kilter. And I think at the moment I am becoming the bottleneck in that we've got like 3 videos that I just need to sit down and make the time to film, but I don't have a way of tracking when I intend to film certain videos, only when I intend to publish certain videos. And at the moment it's like, when I've got some free time, I'll film the video. But then because stuff happens, when I've got free time, ends up like actually never happening. And so, so I like your idea of having a specific date for when you're going to film the thing as well.
Yeah, and the next action can change. It's
Yeah.
whatever the next action is. If it's writing, if it's filming, if it's editing, whatever it is, I give it that date
Yep.
for the next action. And I actually track it. I have a parallel tracking with my task list
Yeah.
in my main to-do date.
Yep.
That's an extra step, but it's worth it to me because then it's everything. My to-do list has everything going on. But
Yeah.
with your team, what would be helpful though is you could have, of course, you're going to assign an owner to each step of the task, but this view here
Mm.
could be filtered. This one isn't filtered, but it could be filtered to the owner is me, the me designation. So
Mm.
whoever's logged in and viewing it, they'll
Mm.
only see the things assigned to them. That would be like a global one. And then you could assign an individual person and have different toggles. So each
Yeah.
person can see their next action dates only for their assigned actions.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I feel like
So
with the whole system stuff, I'm finding that yeah, I tend to be the bottleneck, and I'm trying to remove
we,
myself as the
that's
bottleneck.
inevitable.
Yeah.
But you're the creator of the organization, and we're moving from you being doing everything to
Yeah.
adding people. So
Yeah.
it's inevitable. I mean, but you just have to minimize your bottlenecking activity.
Yeah. And I guess what I could do is, and this was something that a friend of mine suggested, that at the moment I'm kind of managing a lot of this stuff in my head, and let's say in that we've got this Notion database, and it's working pretty well, but still in my head it's like, okay, Angus has got these 2 videos that he's working on, Elizabeth is doing that, Christian's editing these 3 things. Okay, cool. That means that we've got a sponsored video coming out next week. That means today I need to film this, and it it's all basically there in Notion. I just haven't yet set up like a view to actually see it, so I can outsource it from my own head thinking about
Right.
it.
We'll have multiple calendar views. You could set up a toggle with a different calendar view under each one, so you
Yep.
have a stack of them
Yep.
for different needs. Like if you just have 2, you might as well do 2. But if you're doing more than 2, then embed them under toggles
Yeah.
and pop them open as needed, given what you're looking at any given moment.
That's a very good idea. Multiple calendar
But
views.
but have all the
Yeah.
views preformed. I mean, you could also put embed the alternate view here, but I find that it's often less effective because first of all, I forget about those all the time.
Yeah, I always forget about
And
all the views that I've got.
so that's why I
Yeah.
do like here. I've got toggle, 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 right? Because I want to see the list. It reminds me,
Sick. Okay.
and I do that on many other pages too. And it's also faster. It's 1 click rather than 2 clicks, 1 2 versus 1 click. So.
Okay. That's very clever.
And most importantly, you can open 2 together at the same time and compare and contrast and drag across from one to the other, which you can't do if you're changing the whole embedded view.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Multiple content calendars. Writing that in. So multiple calendar views. I just didn't really clock that you could do that. I kind of
I
just,
do, yeah, I do hope that Notion adds the ability to have multiple views, multiple date properties in a single view. That's a feature I'd
Yeah.
like to see added, but
so
not right now.
So at the moment, for a given calendar view, you define the calendar based on a particular timestamp.
You want one date property.
Okay.
You can't show 2 different date
Got
properties,
it. Which is why you
can
have
be
a
frustrating.
next action would have might have a different date to date of publication.
Right. When you open the properties here, it asks you calendar by, and then these are the 2 date properties in this database.
Yeah.
You have to pick one of them, not both of them.
Nice. Yeah, I think that would just solve so many problems. Just having a
I know.
next action date and sticking it in a calendar view.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is
that-
game
and
changing. Oh my
and
goodness.
the next level would be to have not just the next action date,
Yeah.
but have a shoot date, an editing date, a whole layout. Like that's what a production studio would do.
Oh,
Because you'd have different. But to me, that's just too much.
Yeah.
It's too many dates to manage, especially since I'm doing most of them.
Yeah.
So just the next action is the date I need to do whatever's next for this particular piece of content. But if you had a
Okay.
lot of people, if you had different writers and different editors
Yeah.
and different graphics people, you might just set a date for each, and then the person doing that function could look at the view for, say, editing, or look at the view for put the graphics for the thumbnails
yeah.
or the motion graphics.
And I guess the
depends
thing-
on the team.
And I guess the thing with all these systems is that there is a tendency towards entropy/chaos, and therefore you need to invest a little bit of time to just ensure that everything is up to date and actually the system is reflecting what's happening in real life.
Right, the weekly review, you'll jump in here and just do some cleanup. If you do it every week, it'll never be too out of whack, and you can clean it up within a few minutes each week.
Mate, it all comes back to to the weekly review.
If you do it once a month, it's going to be a much bigger project than if you do it once a week. No, usually you do it when you post a video.
Yeah.
And if you had assistants, you might just have the assistants, whenever it's posted, go and organize and clean up. and then you're just managing the new incoming
Oh,
pipeline.
amazing. So I could just say to Elizabeth, "Hey,
Yeah.
man, can you just make sure this
Right. Yeah.
this is just actually
Well,
in line
whenever we
with what's
post
actually going
something,
on?"
yeah, you should have an
Yeah.
SOP, a standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
So every time a video is posted, here
Mm.
are the steps you go through. And one of the steps is you change the status of the content item in this database to published. You bring the link over, you embed the link in the workspace
Yep.
below. Anything you want to normally do, that's part of the SOP for,
Yep.
quote, posting a video.
Yep. Oh, amazing. This is game changing.
The SOPs are a whole nother area of game-changing practice.
Yeah, the SOP thing as well. Like I read that in the eMyth, and I did it a little bit, and now because so we've got like two full-timers and a part-timer in the team at the moment, apart from me, and I feel like I know all of them now well enough where it's just like everything is sort of handled on Slack and just sort of very ad hoc, and I know that this is not the right way to do it because
Oh, right.
yeah,
Well, yeah, conversations should be contextual. So
yeah,
if you're talking about a piece of content, it should be in the content entry in the content board. If you're talking about a project, it should be Notion has good context specific discussion
yeah,
threads. Now, Slack is for when there's no inherent context. It's something more broad and general. But if it's about a piece of content, the discussion should be on that content entry in the database. If it's about a project or a client, it should be in that client page in the client database or in the projects page in the project database. So everything is in one place for that thing. It's contextual.
yeah, and we've certainly done that. So like for example, if we're collaborating on a video script or something, we'll just kind of use the comments feature and use inline comments and use all this stuff, and it actually works pretty well because then you know exactly what the thing is that you're talking about rather than trying to screenshot from Notion into Slack and commenting on it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's an evolution too. I mean, you don't start with the perfect system
Yeah.
on day one. You sort of evolve into it.
Yeah, and I think one thing I've started doing recently is sort of when I feel a pain point, like really identifying, okay, what is the pain point here? What is the systems-based solution that could potentially solve this pain point? So, for example, earlier today, I had a pain point of, well, I've got these 3 videos on my list of things to film, but I haven't actually yet looked at the script for any of them. And I know that I'm going to need to make some changes to the script. So now all of a sudden this, I just need to film 3 videos has become a much longer of, I need to go through every script, make sure that it's in line and it's my voice. And I was thinking, a way of kind of systematizing that would be to have a process whereby I have a date for filming a given video, and at least 24 hours before that, I know that I have to look at the script for it, and that again is something that my assistant or that one of the team could just kind of keep on top of. That okay, we're filming video X tomorrow, therefore we need to have the script in Ellie's hands by Thursday, and then just kind of making the time to do all of that things. But yeah, I think that next
That's
action
where
thing
if you
will be
have
really
a lot
helpful.
of people with a lot of moving parts,
Yeah.
then more dates for each step would be helpful. The date for the writing, the date for the script approval, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sweet.
I mean, Notion's going to be adding, we've been teasing it for a long time, a Gantt chart, which gives you
yeah, that would be really
sort of the flow of a longer term project. It was a year ago they teased it on Twitter,
Yeah.
so who knows when we'll get it. But apparently it's in the works, as I've been told. So
Fingers
that'll be
crossed.
helpful for this.
Sick. What does your monthly review look like?
Well, it's conceptually similar to the weekly review. But let's jump over to that. Oh yeah, we'll go to alignment. So monthly, again, this is the template, but we'll jump into September here. All right, so monthly, you see again a lot of roll-ups. All these ones with the magnifying glass on the left are automatic roll-ups from the weekly review. So I'm not entering any of that. And then the ones with arrows are relations, so I'm not entering any of that either. So 85% of this, 90% of this is automatically rolling in. So at the end of the month, when I open this to do the review, almost 90% of this is filled out with information that informs me on how well the month went.
Yep.
So down here, I like to add a meaningful image to represent the month because I like to see a gallery of all my months and sort
nice.
of a
That's a good idea.
reminder, just
Yeah.
sort of a nice personal touch.
Yeah.
Then enter database fields above and skim action. So this is going to list my action items for the month. Obviously, it's a sample database, but it's going to have all the things I did for the month, just the high priority ones. So not the quick items, not the errands, not the reminders, but all the important ones. This can be a longish list, but it's helpful to just skim it because it's so easy, again, to forget what you did 2 or 3 weeks ago, even 3 days ago. And that just sort of refreshes your memory. So I'll enter the data. The very little data I need to enter is the theme for the month, which I do when I set it up at the beginning, and what I would need to do this month to make this month awesome. At the end of the month, I enter the thing I'm most grateful for the month. It could be 2 or 3. And that's all I'm entering. So I enter that and then I check that off. Again, it's designed to be as fast as possible with no overlap from the weekly review.
Yep.
And then I it's organized by pillars, pipelines, and vaults, which is high level stuff, action flow, process flow, and knowledge management. And so we review performance and my daily tracking and habit routines and adjust habits and routines as needed. So I have my daily tracking stuff here, which we saw. And then I've got my habits and routines. I map out with intentionality all the habits and routines in my life that I intend to do. If you want, I can show you that database. This is just an empty one because it's a template. But I'll say I'm going to read in the afternoon for an hour every day. I'm going to work out in the morning for an hour every day. And it's all laid out here. It's a simple database just to define my intentions. Then I track with the habit tracker what I've done. So what I'm doing here is I'm just reviewing my daily tracking to see if I need to change any of my habits and routines. So once a month, I reassess my habits and routines. If something comes up in the middle of the month, I might make a tweak, but I'll deliberately stop and think about whether I need to change any habits and routines once a month based on my habit tracking data. Then I will review my fitness and make any changes to my fitness plan. And then I'll review and refine my mindset. Again, I almost never do that. So these are all pretty quick checkoffs.
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. Then I get into like the most important stuff, which is the pipeline. So in the weekly review, we're making sure every project had active tasks. Now we're looking at our goals and making sure we have the right projects lined up and active for the month.
Okay.
Now I do 2 kinds of goals. I do a value goal and an outcome goal, or goal outcome. And the reason is because you want a goal to be measurable and identifiable. You want to know when it's finished and how you're proceeding on it. So it needs to be measurable. But when I sit and think about measurable goals, I find they're not very inspiring goals. They're very transactional. I just try to think of what I can measure and force it into a goal. So instead of doing that, I start with value goals. I think, what do I want to accomplish in my life? Like what on an emotional level makes me excited? My value goals are not measurable. They're not trackable, but I get excited talking about them. Like my heart gets fired up. So I want to have this thriving business with people who love to work there. And I want to have creating content that inspires people and helps people. I want to do these things that make a dent in the world. And so I'll lay them out on a very emotional, ephemeral, sort of non-practical level. And then I'll translate each of them into a goal outcome that's measurable and trackable. Now it may take several goal outcomes to reach a value goal. And the value goal itself is a moving target. So, if I want to be really fit and healthy and I set the goal of reaching a certain weight target, once I reached it, well, there's always another goal for getting fit and healthy, right? So the value goals are moving targets, but I'm excited about them, and they define what I want to accomplish in life. The goal outcomes are translating that into a smaller chunk in maybe a 3 or 4 or 6 month period that's measurable and trackable. And then the goal outcomes can be advanced in 1 or 2 ways, either through habits and routines or through projects. And in my alignment zone pyramid, I can see what's assigned to each goal outcome to make sure it's moving forward.
So on the note of goals, I have a very weird relationship with goals because on the one hand, there is like the James Clear / Jason Fried approach, which is that, well, goals are a bit pointless because you set a goal and then it's actually it's the system and the process that's important. So you set a goal of I want to run a marathon in a certain amount of time, but then it's actually the day-by-day system that gets you there. But then also there's a view that, well, goals are a bit pointless because when you hit a goal, then the goalpost just changes again, and you're in this constant state of unsatisfactoriness because you're always working towards goals. Added to kind of the general vibe of, well, we're all doing pretty well in life. Let's just, be satisfied with where we are, and suffering is desire, and all of that kind of stuff. So how do you how do you feel about goals?
You're asking this. Yeah, I'm so happy you're asking this. This is such a nonsense debate because they're not mutually exclusive. Systems and processes are super important and more important, but the goal is the compass. The goal is the direction. So you don't want to just have a system and process just for the sake of having. What's it trying to? What's the point of that? Like, what's the direction? the goal is the compass. And at the same time, a goal by itself isn't anything. You need a
Okay.
system and process to get there. You need both of them. Now, yeah, at the end of the day, the system and process I think requires a lot more focus and energy and
Mm.
matters more. But the goal is where you're trying to get. It makes no sense to try to say one is better than the other. They work complementary. They're perfectly in tandem.
Okay. Is it not reasonable to say I don't really? So when people ask me what, like, I had a call with a sort of business coach guy earlier today, and it was like our first call, and he was saying, what are your goals? And I was like, well, I don't really have any. I'm loving what I'm doing right now, and I want to keep doing it. And as long as the numbers are trending up, and I'm kind of vaguely diversifying my revenue away from just relying on YouTube, then
Hmm.
I guess that's a win. And he was really trying to get me to
Yeah.
be more specific with the goal thing.
Well, first of all, goal doesn't have to be a traditional goal. Like a goal could be, I just want to be more relaxed in my life. I want to reduce my stress level. Like that's
Okay.
a goal.
Yeah.
Like a peaceful existence
Yeah.
with nothing scheduled on my calendar could be a goal. Like
Okay.
it could be, you can pick the goal you want. Like any goal is a valid goal if it's what matters to you. So if you just want to have a chill life, like
Yep.
frame that as a goal. Like that's again why I separate value goals from measurable goals
Yep.
because it's easier to have these value goals. But in your instance, first of all, I don't know you that well, but I suspect you have some goals. You just haven't articulated them. But
Yeah.
instinctively, there's certain things you want. You just
Probably.
haven't really. And I think your coach is trying to eke them out of you. So what are these things you're working toward? Because you're a hardworking, ambitious person building interesting things. That doesn't happen randomly by accident. Like, whoops,
Hmm.
I built a million plus YouTube channel. How'd that happen? No, you had some things you were reaching for. And so it's helpful to be explicit and intentional about them. So I think the coach's questions were good. I don't believe you don't have goals. I do believe you might not have clarity on them,
Okay. How,
but I don't believe that they're not in you.
how do I get clarity on them? Like, what sort of questions would you ask?
You start with questions. Like questions help bring clarity, right? So you have to ask the right questions. What, but you don't necessarily have to start with what are my goals. That may
Hmm.
be the problem.
Okay.
So what do you care about in life? Like what matters to you? Like why do you even get up in the morning?
Yeah,
We
that's
could
a.
walk through it, or I could lay out the process, or we could actually walk through
Oh,
it.
let's walk through it. Yeah, this is perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So
Like,
what
what's
do
the
I
point?
exactly? What is the point? this is this is the thing I always come back to because I'm like,
Yeah.
I think when I was working full time, it was like, okay, I get up in the morning and I go to work. And now it's like, well, I can get up whenever I want. I can do whatever I want. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun making videos, but I know I don't have to do it because it's like, the channel is growing anyway. I kind of think sometimes, hey, it'd be cool to make 3 videos a week. Then I think, well, I could just make 1 video a week and the channel will still do all right. And then I'm thinking, why do I care about the channel at all? I mean, things are going well enough. And so,
Yet
yeah,
you don't make one a week, or you don't make one a month. You could make one a month. Nobody's stopping you from making one a month, but why don't you
yeah,
do that?
that's true. Why don't I do that? I don't want to do that because part of me is saying because making videos is fun, but that's not actually the reason. That's me being dishonest with myself. Um, because ultimately I want the channel to grow and I want the revenue to grow. And
Aha.
as a side effect, I want the impact on people to grow. But certainly, my own motivations are much more selfish than altruistic on this.
But why do you want it to grow? Why does that matter?
Yeah, you're right. What does it matter?
What do you get? What do you get out of that?
Well, I think I'm generally a fairly risk averse person, and so even right now, even though things are going very well on the channel and the business front, there is always a thing in my mind that, oh,
Hmm.
what if it all comes crashing down and I end up homeless and broke? And so all of this partly feels like a very elaborate way of trying to build a bigger and bigger safety net around my life.
So it sounds like you value security and stability,
Yes.
which is not a crazy thing to value,
Yeah.
by the way. That's a perfectly reasonable, rational thing to value.
Okay.
So one of your value goals would be to have financial stability, and it also, I imagine you like the opportunities it gives you. It gives you freedom and flexibility.
Yeah.
So one goal could be stability, financial stability. One
Mm.
could be I'm guessing it's more financial stability that this delivers ultimately, not emotional stability.
Yeah.
That would be a different path.
Mm.
It gives you options. it gives you career options,
Yeah.
flexibility, freedom in
Okay.
life. So there are two goals right there.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
now you might ask, what are the best way to get to those goals? So maybe this channel isn't the best way to get there. I
Yeah.
actually think it is a pretty good way to get there, but it's worth asking, what other ways could I get to those goals that I'm not doing?
Hmm.
Now, you're a funny example because you're a real success story in this particular channel that lots of people have identified as an ideal path. But even you should be asking, are there other ways to get there better? And other people who don't have the good fortune of being in the position you're in, who haven't achieved like a vehicle to get there and are starting from scratch, which is, I imagine a lot of viewers can ask, what would be the ways to get to that financial stability? What would be the ways to get to having a broad range of professional opportunities and freedom,
Hmm.
professional freedom? So just map these out, write them down, lay them out.
Okay.
And then what seems realistic? What do you have the best head start on? And these are different levels too. There's like the immediate first step level. Then there's once I reach a certain momentum with the initial kickoff, map it out at different levels. Like paint a picture of how you get from this point, my current state, to my desired state, and try and paint out multiple paths and then evaluate the probability of success for each path, how
Okay.
much you'd enjoy it,
Yeah.
how much it plays to your strengths,
Yeah.
what the environment, and going back to systems thinking is very much
Yeah.
thinking about the environment, what's trending upward and what's where I've worked in industries that are collapsing and I've worked in industries that are growing. And let me tell you, it's a world of difference.
Okay.
So the environment matters a lot. So which environment is favorable for each of those different paths?
Okay. And I guess that's the sort of thing that changes over time because like right now when I kind of imagine my life in 10 years time, it's like so hard to do because I can't imagine beyond the current moment. And
Yeah.
I probably overweight the, oh, but what if YouTube just dies and what if I don't know, I get cancelled overnight and suddenly no one is following any of my stuff anymore. Okay, cool. I still got the medicine thing. I I don't
A
know.
good
It's
question to
yeah.
ask. I definitely think you should do that assessment.
Yeah.
But I mean, you don't need to stress about it, but do the thought process. But 10 years is a lot. I mean, it's worth mapping out some ideal value goal type
Yeah.
reaches for 10 years, but don't spend a lot of time on that because
Okay.
so much is going to change. You're going to be a different person. 5 years is probably a better horizon
Mm.
in terms of your long-term planning. And then, do some breakdowns 1 year, certainly 1 year and 5 years for sure. And then, but see a map or bridges from each of those points,
Okay.
and but play out multiple scenarios and ask, what else could you do? I mean, there are numerous ways to get to those broad objectives of
Yeah.
financial stability and freedom and career opportunity.
Yeah.
And but again, it seems to sort of lay itself out more for you, but for people watching who don't already have huge progress down one path,
Mm.
it's even more important because it just seems like this blank page and it's overwhelming. Well, start laying out some scenarios. Like, if I try to build a YouTube channel, either it's going to work or it's not, or some degree in between. Is that worth the effort? Because it takes a ton of effort. Is that worth the effort versus starting something else or getting employment here or being mentored in this context or
Mm.
going back to school? Lay the scenarios out. What fits your strengths? What makes sense in the context of the environment? And start one and keep your options open as you go. But you want to map this out. If you just let things happen randomly,
Yeah.
it's much less likely you're going to get to the goals you're identifying for yourself. But yeah, but then you put systems and processes in place to execute. It's not like the
Yeah.
goals eliminate the need of the systems and processes.
Let's say we've got a values goal of I want to be, I don't know, financially independent. For example, how important is it? And just me saying this out loud makes it sound stupid, but like how important is it to actually have a measurable goal to work towards for that thing, in your
I
opinion?
mean, it's important. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
It's not. Many people do it without that.
Okay.
It happens without it, but
Yeah.
it's less predictable, and you often end up just straying. Right? You're gonna start going in the wrong, or you're gonna start forgetting what your goal was and just start doing more impulsive things, more opportunistic things, or you're gonna be frustrated because you don't know if you're progressing, or you're gonna be overly optimistic because you're not really tracking the progress. Some people just get caught up in the fantasy and just live there,
Yep.
but don't realize that they're running on a treadmill and haven't moved an inch. So this is going to give you it's the roadmap. So if the goal is the compass, the tracking is the map where you're checking your position relative to where you started and relative to where the compass is pointing.
Okay. And
You know?
I suppose that
Go
could
ahead.
apply to a lot of a lot of things as well, because certainly like even though I don't like the word goal, I think it's just like a I need to get over my semantic issue with that word, because certainly one of my goals in life is to get married and have kids someday. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's the sort of thing whereby at the moment I'm really not doing an awful lot to get there. But it's the sort of thing where you can probably
Well,
make a thing of I want to go on at least 2 dates a week. Would be a
but that's
pretty
the other thing.
reasonable start. Yeah.
Goals let you prioritize.
Yeah.
Once you have a list of goals, you can start changing the order.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that's probably not a high priority, whereas other things are higher priorities, and
Yeah.
you got plenty of time. So so by defining the goals, you can also get a better sense of relative priorities, and that'll help you allocate your scarce resource of time.
Okay. Well, I guess to
Yeah,
start
they all fit together. It's all part of the same system.
starts with
It's not one or the
identifying.
other.
Yeah, like so a couple of months ago, I made like a little bucket list. Just in sort of in my annual review last year, I just made a bucket list in Notion, and just like having the list there was just like really helpful, because now I look at it occasionally and think, oh yeah, I do want to learn snowboarding. Huh. I wonder if I can go to
Yeah.
snowboarding trip. Or like, oh yeah, I did want to take art lessons. That would be kind of cool. Why did I look into art lessons? And whereas before having that just written down somewhere, I would forget that I wanna become a concept artist, or that I want to learn how to snowboard.
Clarity and transparency in your life. There is so much going on in your life
Yeah.
that your mind cannot wrap itself around all of it at once. So it constantly feels this sort of disconcerting stress or anxiety because there's stuff outside of what it can actually contain at one time. A comprehensive life operating system in Notion or wherever you build it,
Yeah.
or on pen and paper even, can reduce that anxiety greatly because especially if you have the weekly and monthly review, because
Mm.
you know everything has been looked at. Nothing has gone unexamined. So when you move to the sort of that RAM in your head,
Mm.
using a computer analogy, moves to a different set of data, it knows the stuff it's not looking at is in order. But if it's not structured and you're not systematically checking each part on a routine basis, there are loose threads and you're like, I have no idea where that is, what kind of disaster is brewing there. But if you know you've checked it, when you move away from it focusing on something else, you don't have the anxiety because you know it's under control and you can jump back to it at a moment's notice and it's all lined up to re-examine without
Mm.
much startup costs getting back into it. But if there are loose threads everywhere and
Yeah.
you're not systematically examining them, you carry an anxiety with you
Yep.
that is to some degree debilitating. Like
Mm.
it burns energy that could be used for more productive purposes.
Yeah, definitely. And this kind of reminds me of how like when I first discovered like capture, from getting things done. It's just like, oh my god,
Right.
I don't have to store all of this stuff in my head anymore. I can just put it in. I can just write it down
Absolutely.
somewhere. And now I have like any time I'm holding an idea in my head, I feel like an allergic reaction of like, oh crap, this I've got to write this down somewhere because this is just going to disappear. And that
Right.
just takes up a whole load off my mind. But I guess I haven't applied that concept to also the sort of important but not urgent things. So things like, it's fairly important to me to get married at some point. It's fairly important to me that I, learn how to produce songs and stuff. But because all of these things are very non-urgent, I almost
Right.
never even think about the fact that there are things that I want to achieve.
But those are the most important things
Yeah.
for the goal system because the urgent things show up as tasks just by their own
Mm. Just by
force of
default,
nature.
almost.
And
Yeah.
the little things that are not attached to projects and goals
Mm.
will just pop up because they've got hard due dates. They've got
Mm.
firm completion dates. The important but not urgent, they don't have urgent completion dates. Yet those are the things that change the arc of your life.
Yeah.
Like that's why they're important, right? The little stuff doesn't change the arc of your life.
Yeah.
That's why it's essential to map out the goals, like the where you actually want your life to go,
Yep.
and build projects and then assign tasks to those projects. So mixed in with the immediate urgent stuff are actual tasks on each day's calendar for the big important but not urgent. So it gets worked in there. And the night before, you're actually determining which is first priority and which is second. Some days the urgent will be, and some days the important will be, but you'll be making deliberate choices with everything in context. If you just go by default, it's going to be urgent, urgent, urgent with
Yep.
no important.
And I guess that's one of the benefits, amongst many, of having your sort of life organized, like your life operating system, in a single place, so that because like at the moment I have my bucket list of important but not urgent things very much separate to my day-to-day task list of this video needs to come out, this script needs editing, and so I'm, by virtue of the fact that the system is designed in that way, I start to operate purely in an urgent but not in an urgent sphere of life, where I'm not
It's
actually
the
making any
default.
progress towards like the long-term stuff that I actually want to do. I'm just trying to figure out, oh shit, what's the next video going to be?
It's the default. If you don't
Yeah.
apply intentionality to it, you'll default to that every time.
Yeah.
Because that's the definition of urgent, right? Urgent makes itself known,
And I suppose
but
I suppose in that sense, like setting goals would, because at the moment I view setting goals as like, oh, what am I doing here? But like it would then be quite a fun exercise, because I've kind of had in the back of my mind that it would be cool to, for example, do a road trip around Europe and live in a different city for just a few months, for a month at a time. But it's a goal without a project. Therefore, it's just a dream. It's never it's realistically not going to happen until I write it down. By like, all right, goal is to live in Paris for a month. Project equals figure out where I can live in Paris, figure out lockdown situation, ask my assistant to find Airbnbs. All of that suddenly becomes possible by literally just writing down the goal is to live in Paris for a month.
right now you can list goals that are some goals are active and some goals are future.
Yeah.
Like in the system, I've got tags for future, next up, active. So you can't do everything at once. That's also a recipe for getting nowhere. Just if you spread yourself so thin, nothing gets done. So you have to choose now, at this point in my life,
Yeah.
what are the important goals to work on. But you should enter every goal you have that's long term that you want to get to someday, enter it as a future goal. Put it in the system, in the database, in the goals database. And then when you're periodically, quarterly, I'll look at the different goals
Yeah.
and say, all right, which of the goals we need to fire up and upgrade in terms of their priority status into potentially the active status. But you don't want to forget them. And again, just so you don't have this anxiety driven by things outside of your field of view,
Yeah.
you want to have them in there. And then once a quarter, you'll look at all of them lined up in order, the active, then the next up, then the future. And you can change the order at any time. You can always put an active on hold.
Yeah.
But you want to just see them all laid out so you can make a clear decision. And then once you've made the decision of what's active this quarter,
Yeah.
you let go of it. You let go of it, and then the projects and tasks will feed into your daily system. You don't have to think about the rest of it again till the end of the quarter, unless you feel inspired to.
So I wonder if I can actually share my screen with you here, because I'd love to show you some of my.
Do I need to unshare, or do you have it?
I think I've clicked the button, and then you should in theory be able to see a
I can
Notion
see
screen.
it. Yeah, let me just move it over to my other screen here.
And let me just make sure that everyone can see this page. Do you see this Notion page?
I do. It's very small though. It's not letting me full screen it, but I can see it enough.
Sure. What about?
I can read it.
Cool. So I can't
Dreams. Okay.
I can't remember when I made. I made it like literally a few weeks ago, when I think I saw one of yours and I was like, oh, let me do the everything in Notion thing, and I just kind of made this list of sort of things on my bucket list, and like a lot of these are a few of these are like current goals. Most of them are like future goals, but I guess the next thing would be to actually kind of create projects for some of these.
Yeah. I mean, so
Is that how you'd
let's
approach
see.
it?
What's the scope of these? That's what I'm trying to. So some of these are pretty big scope. Like have a kid, become a Gymshark athlete. I've seen you talk about that. Yes.
Yeah, man.
Okay. So yeah. So
Manifesting.
these are what I would call value goals. Yeah.
Okay.
Bucket list could be very specific and small in scope, like bungee jump, or they could be very broad in scope, like get married. So these tend to be on the broader side. So the broader ones I would classify as value goals, but it doesn't matter what you call them.
Okay.
So then these at this scale, I would then translate them into goal outcomes. Now, goal outcome doesn't mean when you finish the goal outcome, you finish the value goal. Again,
Okay.
value goals are in many cases moving targets, but
Okay.
even if it's fixed, like get married, then you could take, it could be several goal outcomes to get there. So maybe
So what's a
you need
goal
to get in
outcome? Like,
shape first.
what does goal outcome mean?
Well, goal outcome is the measurable, trackable version of at least either the full or partial step of the value goal, and it has a clear. You can clearly identify when it's accomplished. Either you know when it's done, you know when it's not done.
Okay.
It's like a clear finish line,
Right.
which is not the case with value goals. So, some of them, but not with all of them. So if your goal is to get married, for example, you might, and this is, you could approach it different ways, but maybe
Yeah.
you want to first get into shape so
Yeah.
you're a better candidate on the
Of
market.
course.
So first you're
Absolutely. Yeah.
gonna
Increase
meet
my
your
sexual
fitness
marketplace
goals.
value. Yeah.
Exactly. So you're gonna join it. So your goal will be to maybe hit a certain weight level or
Yeah.
however whatever metric you want to use.
Okay.
Might be a certain body fat level, it might
Yeah.
be a certain nutritional content level, however
Yeah.
sophisticated you want to get with it.
Okay.
So you'll set the goal of, say, hitting this weight target, and then you'll then set the now goal outcomes can either have projects to get to the goal
Okay.
outcome, or they can have habits and routines.
Oh,
Like this is
yeah.
a little different
The
than a
two
project. So
ways
a
of
project,
accomplishing. Yeah.
right? A project is always accomplished through tasks,
Okay.
but a goal outcome is usually accomplished from projects, but sometimes it's accomplished through habits and routines. So business goal outcomes tend to be projects, but a fitness and health one tends to be habit and routine. So in my layout of my alignment zone,
Yeah.
you'll see for each goal outcome, there's a habit column and there's a goal project column.
Okay.
Every active goal outcome must have one or the other. It could have both, but it must have at least one or the other, or it's stalled, it's orphaned. So in the case of the fitness one, you might establish a habit and routine, or multiple ones. You could say have your workout routine, you could have your nutrition and diet, what you consume routine. So you set those into place, and those are different from projects because they don't have tasks driving them. They have assigned times, either daily or however many times a week. They have a routine scheduled on your calendar, like actual time blocks, not just I'll get to it when I can, but actual routine defined in calendar time blocks.
And I suppose when you're doing your weekly, monthly reviews, at that point, you're seeing, are the actions that I'm doing actually aligned with the goals that I say are my active goals?
Exactly.
Sick.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it brings it it's a system. So it's a system that doesn't let you miss anything. So you're going to say, when you're looking at your goal, this is the monthly review part. You look at your goals and you say, does every goal have an active habit and routine, at least one, potentially more, or a project? If it has neither, it's dead. It gets to the dead end, and you have to add one. During the week, you're going to be looking at every project, making sure it has active tasks, which could be fulfilling a mission towards a goal and outcome. But you're also going to be reviewing during the week your habits and routines, which is being reflected in the habit tracker and the daily data tracking.
Okay.
So that's how you're measuring and making sure you're progressing. And now, if you're not progressing, you need to assess and ask why not. Is it because you have the wrong habits and routines? So you're doing them, but you're not getting the results? Or are you not doing them? In which case, again, you have to have a hard talk with yourself and ask yourself some questions like, why am I not doing this? Then we need to start applying some of the James Clear practices, like how do we enhance our ability to fulfill our habits and routines? We could talk about that too. But you see where it's breaking. If whether it's the wrong habit and routine, whether you're not doing the habit and routine, whether the project's tasks aren't being completed, it reveals where the breakdown is in the system.
Sick. Okay. So in terms of organizing this stuff, do you have like a separate database for value goals and a separate database for outcome goals?
Yes, I can show you that. That's the alignment zone.
If we switch screen sharing to you again, if we can. So I'll stop sharing.
Yep. So I am moving to sharing. Let's see. There we go. All right. You should see me now.
Yes. Perfect.
So I'm going over to the template here.
Oh, hang on. You've got a thingy in the middle of the screen.
That was you.
Yep.
The video. Okay. So jumping over to our alignment zone. So remember, action zone was our focus in the daily list and the week planning of the to-do list for each day.
Yep.
Alignment zone is the aligning of the high-level aspirations and the daily actions, which are listed here, but I never engage with the tasks here. It's just here, so I have the complete hierarchy. In the middle, we have the goal pipeline, which is the value goals and the goal outcomes.
Okay.
So I'm opening. Hopefully there's some samples in there. Okay, so it's got us a couple samples. Again, this is the template.
Okay.
So first, when you're starting out, you're going to think in terms of value goals. What
Mm.
speaks to me? What do I want to accomplish in my
Okay. Yeah.
life? And this could be really long term, or it could be
Okay.
in the next 3 months. Now, if it's long term, maybe eventually, then you might be, waiting. If you start it, want to stop it, you pause it, or it's active. You could add more levels if you have more that you want to designate by different status
Okay.
categories. But
So on the value goals note, would something like is there any guidelines for what makes a reasonable value goal? Like would for example, live in a nice house be a value goal, or is there a better way of kind of phrasing that, such
live in a
refining
nice
it?
house is a value goal, but I would encourage you to be more specific.
Okay.
So it's like I want to, yeah, be more, make it more clear, because really you want this to, the phrasing here, to paint a picture in your head that is emotionally evocative.
Mm.
Like you want it to
Okay.
inspire. Like you should get excited when you talk about your value goals.
Yeah.
Or it could be something like financial stability. Maybe
Yeah.
that doesn't fire you up, but
Yeah.
it'll bring a lot of relief. Like
Yeah.
it's something that's going to make life much better.
Okay.
So value goals, they're soft, they're tangible, they speak to your heart. But
Mm.
this is what you want to do in your life. Like this is your aspirations. And again, some are active and some are waiting, or you may have a future designation.
Mm.
But you lay them out, and then you decide, what am I going to work on now? Like which of these value goals is pressing,
Mm.
and then you'll make a number of them active. I mean, it could just be one active, but usually you'll have anywhere from 3 to 5 that are active. You could have 10. You don't want to go too broad, because then you get nothing done if you spread yourself too thin. But yeah, it could be, I want to live in I want to live in the mountains. I want to live in a large house that has a guest bedroom so people can visit. Paint a picture of what your ideal dream house is.
Mm.
Try to keep it succinct. And then each of these has a whole workspace under it where you can lay out, the greater vision for it. Like make this a thing you can taste. Like you can see it, you can feel it, and it's just there, just
Yeah.
out of reach, and you just got to work for it.
Okay.
And then you take that value goal, this dream house, and you say, what's a goal outcome that's going to help me get to the dream house? Well, I need to make more money,
Mm.
or I can't get a dream house with what I'm doing right now. So then the goal outcome could be, I need to get a job that pays X amount of
Mm.
salary, or I need to start a business with X amount of monthly recurring revenue.
Yeah.
Well, starting a business is actually a lot of projects. So we're gonna have projects down here, but your goal outcome could be to launch a business that gets to a certain realistic, within the time frame, monthly recurring revenue.
Okay.
And then you take that goal outcome and you open up the projects and you say, what projects are going to get me to that business with that recurring revenue? Well, first I need to, and the first thing, and you do not put the dumb stuff like business cards and
Yeah. All of that.
logos.
Yes. Yeah.
You go to what's actually going to get me there.
Yeah.
Like what's going to move the needle here. And it depends where you are. If you have an idea of the business, you start mapping out how you launch it. If you have no idea, then the first step is to do an assessment of business opportunities. So the project could be review, assess business opportunities, and pick the one that seems like the best fit. So identify business to pursue would be a
Okay.
project.
Yep.
So you're breaking it down, and then you're going to assign tasks to do that. So this whole thing is a hierarchy, which is why I call it a pyramid, with the higher quantity of tasks at the bottom getting narrower and narrower to the more specific principles on the top.
Okay. So what about
But it's all connected. Yeah.
So what about like a thing like, I don't know, learn how to draw nicely or something like that? Like that's not
Yeah.
really a value goal.
It's too small
So,
to be a value goal.
Yeah.
It could, I mean, it feels kind of like a project to me. It could, frankly, it could be a habit and routine. Just practice drawing.
Yeah.
I mean, is there an outcome, a measurable outcome of achievement that matters there? Probably not.
Not really.
So I would just make that a habit and routine.
Okay.
You could make it a goal, but if you want to say, if you can think of something that would mark having arrived. But frankly, it sounds more like just an activity
Yeah.
you would enjoy. So I just make that twice a week. I'm going to sit down for 45 minutes and sketch.
Yep.
That's a habit and routine. It's not, you're not so much measuring the outcome, because the outcome doesn't matter. It's the journey that's like the whole point there.
Quite.
And you'll gradually build skills as you pursue the journey.
Okay.
So you don't want to make things too complex, any more complex than they need to.
Okay. So I guess when I when I've sort of like, it's very easy to just sort of write on a bucket list something like, I don't know, learn archery, or learn sword fighting. But actually, it sounds like what you're saying is that it's worth actually thinking about
Okay.
that a bit harder and figuring out like what do you
But
actually want
yeah.
there,
Why do you want to learn to draw and why do you want to learn archery?
because it might be
So
fun and it might be cool.
okay,
Yeah.
because it's for enjoyment.
Yeah.
So the goal is to spend some relaxing or enjoyable time.
Yes.
You know, have an enjoyable life. Like that's
Yeah.
moving towards having an enjoyable life.
Yeah.
So that's great. Just make it. There's no outcome. So it's not a goal. It's a habit and routine,
Yeah.
fulfilling. Then the other section of the whole system here is the pillars.
Okay.
So the pillars are merely breaking your life into the categories, into categories. So this is often mistaken for areas in para.
Yeah.
It's not areas. This is just purely an organizational structure. You're simply taking your entire life and cutting and chopping it into categories, such that every single thing you do will fit into one of these categories.
Okay.
And then you'll have these sort of super categories. So the growth, business, home life. Those are the super categories. Then the pillars, the main categories, will be a handful for each of those. And everything will fall into those. So we've got learning, which I call mind expansion, but it's basically a learning category. Mental clarity, uh, friends and social life. Then the business ones. So
Okay.
most of these, the business ones will vary from person to person. The rest are pretty consistent.
Yeah.
With some give and take. So you're basically just satisfying some aspect of your life that is enjoyable, right? So you want to spend time with, maybe you want to do an activity like archery for the purpose of spending time with friends or spending time with family. Or maybe it's skill enhancement. So that'd be learning. It's just for the pure sake of learning and growing what I know and what I can do, I'm going to do archery. So it's just part of this category. It's not a goal because there's no outcome that you're trying to reach. Now, if you want to become an archery champion and win tournaments, that's a goal with an outcome. If you just want to do it for the beauty of
Just
doing
for
it and
fun,
for the
yeah.
sake of learning,
Yeah.
then that's just fulfilling that section of your life of learning.
Okay. And so,
Or
would it be fair to say that you don't have value goals for absolutely every one of your pillars, necessarily?
correct.
Okay.
Oh, correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, value goals are your aspirations in life.
Okay.
Now there's some pillars that just have to be taken care of. Like some of them are catch-alls, like business admin.
Yeah.
Sort of like the little stuff that adds up that's got to go into a bucket somewhere. But most of them are more specific. So yeah, value goals are your aspirations in life, your dreams, and what you want to work towards. Pillars is just an organization of everything, so that whenever you need to organize it, it's a way of laying it out. You'll remember back on my command center, it has the categories growth, home, life. I mean, these are the pillars.
Yeah.
These are the pillar categories. So each of these is essentially a dashboard
Okay.
into that section of your life.
Yep.
So a quick glance at everything happening in that area that you're not in the other sense of area, but in that zone of your life. So it's just a quick access overview
Okay.
to manage that part of your life. But it's just organizational structure.
Okay. So the value goals are where you think, what's the impact I want to have in the world? What do I want to do with my life? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, and that comes down to what matters to you in life.
Yeah. So for me, that would be something like, the
And
financial
and that's where we
independence.
have
That
the
would be
guiding
like
principles.
sort of
The guiding
enjoyable
principles.
life. Yeah.
You define what matters to you. That's the result of an annual review.
Okay.
You define what makes life worth living to you, and you'll define this. And this is just the template, so it's empty. But you'll define the things that matter to you, and then from that you should do that first, and then from that you think of your value goals. So given that this is what makes life worth living to me, these are the things I want to accomplish that I'm not there yet. Like I want to get from here to there in being consistent with what I've identified as things that are important to me.
Damn, it's all connected.
It all connects. It's a system. Like, that's what a system
systems
is.
thinking. This is so good.
It's the holistic interconnection of all these parts, and each part makes the other more effective. Each part of the system here, the Notion system, makes the other more helpful to accomplish that component.
Yeah.
But just in life, knowing your guiding principles helps you establish your goals, which helps you establish your projects, which helps you know what to do day to day. It's all connected.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that's a good place to wrap this up. We've been talking for over 2 hours.
Oh wow, covered a lot.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun, and I feel like I've gotten a lot of clarity about stuff that I didn't know any clarity on. So,
Well, thank you. This has been super fun. I really enjoyed exploring this with you. Good questions.
well, thank
You
you.
have a good mind to sort of probe deeper into stuff.
Yeah, man, I was just kind of thinking that, right, what are the issues that I'm having, and I'm just gonna spew them out to you, and you can help kind of sort them out.
Awesome.
But no, this so like on the like your Notion thingy is a big thing I've heard from people when I recommend your channel is, whoa, this looks really complicated. Like, but part of systems thinking,
Good question.
I guess we don't want to just sort of, I don't want to suddenly download all your Notion templates and start applying this. Like, what would be a good place to start slowly building this up?
There are 2 points to that. First is I definitely hear that and I get that, and it's an investment up front. But the thing I just want to communicate that I usually don't have the opportunity to, once you have this in place, life gets easier.
Yeah.
The clarity, it gets smoother. The anxiety reduces. I mean, it's so worth that initial investment.
Yeah.
I mean, in my life and the people I work with closely, I have a consulting practice where I'm doing this constantly with small businesses and increasingly with individuals. And the transformation is just, I mean, it's just the most amazing feeling to see it. So the irony is it's harder up front in order to get easier on the back end. But having said that, it's also too hard to onboard. So that's what I'm doing a course for. I'm launching a course probably next week, announcing it. That's going to massively simplify the onboarding. I'm going to have the master template as part of the course, and you won't have to build it. We'll spend the course learning how to implement it into your life. So that's going to, one of the objectives is to just make it a much easier onboarding process.
Sweet.
But if you want to follow the videos as laid out, my free templates include the action zone, which is the starting place. I recommend you start at the bottom and build up, because first of all, you don't have to do all of it. You can do whatever part you want.
Yeah.
But if you start at the bottom, which is basically the task, so the action zone is,
Yeah, it would kind of be the stuff that I'm already doing anyway.
yeah, it's the task manager and project manager.
Okay.
And then you can add daily tracking. So you can start using it right away as a task manager and project manager.
Yeah.
And then you build up to goals after that. And then you build up to pillars after that. But you can start using it if you start at the bottom. If you start at the top and work down, you can't use it until you finished. So that's why I recommend work at the task level, then go up to the project level, and then go up to the goals level.
Awesome. And lots of people asking in the chat, when is the course? When is the course? So I guess they can follow you on.
The course will. I have a mailing list to sign up for updates now. Next week, I expect to announce the course. It's going to start in October. So probably in a week or so, I'll announce the details of the course, and the course will begin probably in the second half of October.
Okay, so it's going to be live. Yeah. It's not going to be
It's going to be a live cohort-based course. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
This is very exciting.
The whole point is it's too hard to get on.
Yeah.
Just on your own. So I'm really going all out to make it a much simpler onboarding process.
Fantastic. Okay, I will look out for details on that. But in the meantime, I'll get started on the projects and action items, awesome. And also meditation and plus or minus visualization, and doing this content machine next action calendar.
It sounds like a lot,
yeah.
But the irony is it makes things easier when you do them. Like, and there's definitely a bit of a learning curve, but life is just, the anxiety level reduces, the focus level goes up, the results, become there's less clutter between where you are and where you want to get to.
Fantastic. All right. Well, August,
thank you.
Thank
this
you
has
so
been
much.
Amazing. I mean, I really enjoyed discussing this with you.
Yeah.
A great, curious mind, and that's my favorite kind of mind.
This is great stuff. Yeah, and I can't wait to check out the course when it gets released. Links to all of your stuff in the video description, guys. Follow his YouTube channel. There's like hundreds of videos on there about Notion.
30.
If 30. Oh, it's only 30. That's actually very doable. It just looks like such a big list.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, and everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you later. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.